5-0. Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, overarching result for the School District of Shorewood is that our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Thank you. Awards and recognitions.
Yeah, our first recognition for this evening is to recognize our esteemed school board members for all of their hard work. This week is Wisconsin School Board Week, so just wanted to announce that publicly, and thank the 5 of you for your continued service for our community. So if we can give our school board members a round of applause. So thank you and happy School Board Week in Wisconsin. So first, I'd like to congratulate the Shorewood Mountain Bike Club, who raced to another victory recently in Eau Claire. They took first place in Division I for the second time this season, with 29 male and female racers competing at all levels. They had 6 racers finish on the podium. So we had Zoe Nudur, Mark Zuica, I believe it is, David Litton, Zane Bannock, Nick Bucciarelli, and Kyle Griswold all finished on the podium. So congratulations to them on some continued great work with the Mountain Biking Club. Next, I want to acknowledge the Messwood football team who made history a few Friday nights ago when they won the Woodland East Conference. They are hosting the Woodland Championship Conference this Thursday at 7 o'clock, so come on out if you can. They'll be taking on New Berlin Eisenhower, so we'd like to see everybody out there if possible. If you can't make it to the game, it'll also be featured live on My Channel 24 as the game of the week, so stay tuned. Additionally, I'd like to recognize the girls tennis team to be congratulated as 3 ladies qualified for state. At number 1 singles, Margaret Bernecki qualified for state, and Edie Reckmeyer and Lindsay Nelson qualified as 1 double. So congratulations to those ladies. That competition will also begin this Thursday and continue through Saturday at the Nielsen Tennis Stadium in Madison. So best of luck to those 3, and great job in that program. And lastly, I'd like to congratulate the boys and girls cross country teams who were both champions of the Shorewood Invite last Friday at Lincoln Park. Additionally, the boys teams were the champions of the recent meet in the Dells, and the girls finished 9th out of 50 teams at the GRIAC meet up at the University of Minnesota. So congratulations to those runners, and they have their conference and sectional and state meets coming up. So good luck to everybody as we finish the fall season. And that concludes our recognitions for tonight.
Great, thank you.
Can I add one? I just want to recognize our kids who are about to open with To Kill a Mockingbird at Shorewood starting this week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So I would invite everybody to go and see the show.
Great, thank you. All right, so our first up next is student achievement and results, and we're going to hear tonight about an environmental literacy class.
Great. So I'll invite our guests up. So we have Mr. Gitson and Mr. Matthews coming up, and we have 2 students, so why don't everybody can come up at the same time to talk about one of the new courses that have been developed actually this year. We can grab a couple seats from the front row so everybody can sit probably. So environmental literacy has been a course, and I'll have the staff talk about kind of the development of the course, but it's really something that we think is getting at this mission of authentic learning and being able to do some cross-curricular opportunities for students. So we'll hear from staff and then hear from, most importantly, the students and what their experience has been over the first month. So.
All right. Well, my name is Eric Gibson, and I'm an English teacher.
You can pull it over.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I don't think it's on. Okay.
no, it was on. No, it's on.
The red light's on.
Yeah.
Okay. And
All right.
we developed this course in response to a call for authentic learning in the Shorewood School District. So Eric Matthews and I, who have been teaching together for a while in Water and Wisdom, in both official and unofficial ways for close to 2 decades, decided to take something from that model and bring it to the regular school year. In a block class format, we've combined environmental science and environmental literature, some select genres in environmental literature, put them together in a 2-hour block at the end of the school day. And we infused that curriculum with 4 very intentional adventures outdoors so that students might have some context for the way they think about science, the way they think about literature and writing.
There you go.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, so the only thing I would add to that, Eric Matthews, by the way, the science teacher with this course, is to build on Eric's comment about these 4 adventures. We've built that as kind of the backbone or the spine of the course, and we've chosen 4 distinct ecosystems and 4 distinct regions of the state to have these formative experiences in. So we have visited Devil's Lake, we're going to visit Door County, we're going to visit the Driftless area, and then we're going to visit a facility that's owned and operated by UW Stevens Point up in the Northwoods. So our students are going to be immersed in kind of the 4 major regions of the state of Wisconsin with some adventure and some experiential learning in nature. And then what we're trying to do as teachers is give them the tools to understand those experiences beforehand, and then present them with some really authentic ways to reflect and then communicate their experiences to the wider community. So really embracing many of the principles of kind of 21st century education and what that looks like in terms of educational experiences, and then also how we assess their learning, and then how we help them to communicate that experience so that we don't really miss any of those links in the chain, if you will, between what they're doing in the classroom, what they're doing out in the field, and then how that can impact their community. And like Eric said, we're fortunate because this course kind of grew out of this partnership that we've created with UWM and their School of Entrepreneurship, as we were part of this fellowship program that gave us some intentional time and some intentional structure to develop a new curriculum that doesn't fit nicely in any sort of prepackaged thing. We feel lucky to have truly created something unique. And with that, I'll let our students kind of fill you in on what that unique experience looks like from a student perspective.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm Megan Brockmeyer.
I'm Emma Mercury.
And we're going to tell you a little bit about our environmental literature class. And we have a slideshow to help you understand a little bit more of what we're doing. Okay, so for the English, we are learning about environment, obviously. And it's split into 4 sections: place-based literature, which we have read about,
Which we are
currently reading about.
And we read short stories by Edward Abbey, and right now we're reading Refuge by Terry Tempest Williams and studying that.
Yeah, and then we use English to connect to nature. Like today, we were talking about metaphors and how her writing about nature has like real life metaphors that can be helpful. And then later this year, we'll get into wilderness literature, eco-defense literature, and adventure literature. And then those are some pictures of us rock climbing. And we read a little bit about, at Devil's Lake State Park, and then we read a little bit about the land and what it was like beforehand. So it gave us a lot more thought to when we were climbing.
And yeah, and like in the one of the pictures right there, you can see we've been using tools like microphones to help record kind of what we've been seeing and hearing like on our adventures in the wilderness.
Yeah, so that was
That's the
fun.
English component.
That is English.
Okay.
And English is interwoven throughout the entire course. Like all the science stuff, there's reading and writing we have to do along with it. And then the English, we read about science. So it all mixes together. All right, for science.
So we are learning the principles of the ecology of Wisconsin and applying them outdoors. So we go to places like Hubbard Park and Atwater Beach and even the surrounding campus and learn the ecology of our where we live. And like at places like Devil's Lake, we study the geology of it and how that was formed and stuff like that. And we learn about the natural history and the native species of Wisconsin and the ecological relationships and processes. of Wisconsin and the human influence that we have on nature and the authentic research and field experience.
All right. So right now we learned a lot about the natural history of native species, and when you're reading, the point of the science, like in my eyes, is to obviously understand what's around you, but also help you get a picture in your head about the readings we do. So we're reading about I can't speak. Northern mesic forests, or mesic. I cannot speak today apparently. And it really helps create a picture because we're going outside and we're looking at some white ashes or silver maples, and it really helps create a picture in your head.
Yeah.
And like when we were climbing at Devil's Lake, the rock is mostly quartzite, which is baraboo quartzite, which is a metamorphic rock. So it was really cool to know what kinds of rocks you're climbing, because I would say that's a hard rock. That's it.
That's a rock, yeah.
That's a rock, yeah. So I have more to know now. All right, and then what it's like to be a student in ELS.
I can say that it's an adventure. We're always doing something. We're never just like sitting in the classroom being bored. Like today we were talking about refuge and like Megan said about the metaphors and listening to podcasts about things like that. And it's always, it's not, that's what I'm gonna say. We're always learning and we're always doing hands-on stuff. Like when we're outside, we're learning so much about nature and what's out there and how we can connect it to our world today.
Yeah, going off of Emma's point, there is a lot of hands-on activities. Like we'll go to Hubbard Park and we'll pick up a stick and then we'll try to identify which tree it came from, which is really interesting, and I think it's very cool. But yeah, so it's really a fun class, never boring.
And so like as we said before, we recently came back from Devil's Lake State Park and there we studied the ecology and geology of that place, and we had studied about it in the classroom, but we actually got to experience it in real life and seeing how it's like not just in a classroom setting. And so that was really cool.
Yeah. And we are also going to Door County later this October, and then Bethel Horizons in November, and then Tree Haven in December, which we should also be learning about the geology and then more about the ecosystems that are around there. It should be very interesting.
And some of our best moments, Megan?
Oh, some of our best moments. Oh,
That's kind of hard to choose from.
yeah,
but
there's a lot.
When we were in Devil's Lake, we were rock climbing, and I'd say that was one of the best moments because it was so fun to just see how, just to know all these things about the environment and the geology of an ecosystem and just connect it. And like if you're at the top of a climb and you get to see the view of it and you see everything, it was just so fun to see that. So it's probably my best moment.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the rock climbing at Devil's Lake. It was a very beautiful experience, and I'm glad I got to do it. Yeah, any questions?
Had either of you been to Devil's Lake before this trip?
Yeah.
I had not.
I
Okay,
have.
so for you, did you just look at it with a totally different
Yeah,
lens?
I never really, I was like, that's a tree, how nice. I never paid much attention to it.
Okay.
And I can be like, that's a very nice silver maple or white pine, which there's a lot of in Devil's Lake.
There's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. And I'm taking notice to all these small things I wouldn't have before.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because I'm like, look at all these trees. The rocks are created by glaciers, and it's like all this new information, and it's really great.
And like on that, taking small notice of things, like on my walk home to school, like I'll look at the trees and I'll be able to say, oh, that's a white ash tree. Like I'll know it in my head, and I think that's pretty cool to know because I never noticed like how different each tree is and all that stuff.
That's very true. When I walked home, like right after we learned the trees, I would be like, that's a white ash. That's a green ash. Gets in your head.
So I guess a question for the creators. Thank you. Is this course open to school board members that
Yeah.
but are pretty illiterate when it comes to walking through the woods?
Absolutely.
I say that jokingly, but in all seriousness, so it's a block class. Is it like 6th and 7th hour?
Yeah.
Okay,
All right,
so then
and
if you do
go
trips, you
from
can go right
one-
from there.
one from the science building for Mr. Matthews' class to Mr. Gitson's? Or are you all in one room for those 2 hours with both teachers? How does that play out? And then you can add these trips to it. Those are on the weekends? Are they, yeah.
All right, so normally we're in Mr. Gitson's class for the entire period, and Mr. Matthews joins us. Sometimes we'll be in Mr. Matthews if we're focusing mainly on science, but it's almost always Mr. Gitson's classroom, just because that's how it works out. There's nothing special about it, but sorry, it's in Salty Classroom.
I've seen it. It's
It's a classroom.
great teacher, but classroom itself.
But yeah, and then the trips are 3 days, and they lie on the weekends sometimes. They're all on different times. So our last trip was on Fridays.
The last trip was on Sunday to Tuesday.
Sunday to Tuesday. I was
And
totally
next
off.
we are on Thursday to Saturday.
Yeah. So 3 days. We do miss a little bit of school, but you can get your work ahead of time, and then it's not a big deal. Because we have a lot of downtime too. So if you wanted to, you could bring your work camping with you and do it. So that's nice too.
What's interesting to me is, for the first time in this presentation, they mentioned the fact that we're camping. And the skills required to do that comfortably, for example, over 3 days, are no small feat. And they managed to create menus, they managed to cook their own meals, pitch their tents, sleep comfortably enough for those 3 days. And so folded into all of this is also that set of skills required to just camp.
Be in the
So,
outdoors,
and,
yeah.
and it's great, kind of great to hear they just skip right over that, because that was just part of what they did.
And you're gonna winter camp too, so that's
Yeah.
really
Well
challenging.
prepared.
So, oh, go ahead.
This sounds great. I'm wondering how it's structured in terms of academic credits. It counts as a year-long science class and a year-long English class?
One
Or-
semester.
One
each.
semester.
One
Yeah.
semester each, okay.
Yeah.
So are you taking, you're taking another English class on top of this one semester and another science?
I'm taking another science class, and this is the only English class I'm doing this semester.
But next
Next semester, yes.
Yeah.
I'm
semester
taking-
you would
An
double up
elective.
on or you would have an English class?
I would have an
But
English.
you're still doing this, which is kind of English?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And how many students are in the class?
6.
Oh, it's tiny.
Yeah, so
Small.
it's
Yeah.
very, very small, and it wasn't by design or anything, it's just how it happened, so it's a small class.
How many could you accommodate?
Well, that's a good question. There are some transportation logistics
Yeah.
that are pretty significant. So, I mean, we could handle, ideally, probably 18.
I think 18 is, like, I think our enrollment for next semester is around 18 or 19. That's
Yeah.
kind of probably our magic number. We could probably take more than that, but the transportation logistics will be
And then-
somewhat tricky.
When we're in the field, it's important to have a good ratio
For
of
safety.
instructors to
Yeah.
students. Because we're doing things like rock climbing.
Right.
So,
So with 6, your ratio's fine. With the 2 of you, with 18, you're gonna need to recruit some friends.
right, yeah, so what we did this
I
semester.
see Halloran's in the audience. He's probably one of them. No.
This semester, we connected with a woman at the Urban Ecology Center who who joined us on rock climbing and is going to join us on
nice.
2 of our other trips.
Okay.
So that's been a nice little partnership because she has a lot of applicable skills, and she's jumped at the opportunity to do that pro bono.
Nice.
To join us and bring her expertise and enthusiasm. So that's kind of appears to be a model that
Yeah.
we'll be able to sustain going forward. So as our enrollment goes up, we'll continue to look for opportunities to partner with people like that.
And we also found an opportunity, it just sort of made sense to bring the Adventure Ed kids on board for these trips. So their
Oh,
curriculum
okay.
is, pretty much limited to here's how you use a camp stove, here's how you pitch a tent, here's some skills you need for surfing, rock climbing, etc. But what we did is I'm teaching Adventure Ed this year, so we brought those kids in to either review or teach these students how to use camp stove. They collaborated. I think all of the cook groups on our last trip were mixed Adventure Ed kids and environmental literature and science kids. So that wasn't just an opportunity, so we just took it, and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I guess we could both envision a time when those skills required to read the landscape and to live comfortably in the landscape while researching and learning in the field are all sort of one suite of academic experiences. It just makes sense, sort of a diaspora of adventure ed skills to recruit.
So for you girls, has this opened your eyes to future potential jobs or study paths when you graduate from Shorewood?
Yeah, this actually has, this class really has opened my eyes to, like, I've been looking a lot into, like, the environmental fields after high school, and so this class really helped me with that, like, understand, like, what I need to do, because I'm also taking AP Environmental Science on top of that, and so this class has actually really helped me try to discover, like, what I want to do after this.
Oh, well, I don't really know what I want to do.
That's
I
okay
shouldn't,
too.
but
Right.
yeah.
You don't need to.
So, but I think that now that I have this experience, it's definitely like another option for me. Like before, I was like, I don't really like science. I don't want to go into science. But now I'm like, okay, it's not that bad.
So the class has
Science
been
is
better
pretty
than you
cool.
expected?
Oh yeah, it's great, and it's really opened my eyes that not all science is like equations and boring stuff. Sorry, but yeah, no, I think it's definitely a good experience and like help me with my further education.
I was amazed, and a couple of us had the opportunity to put waders on and go into the river with 6th graders from Atwater. Did you guys do that?
Yeah, I think we actually did 6th grade.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it was amazing to me that some of those kids that were probably in the same boat, they were not excited about putting waders on or getting in the river or sticking their hands in and picking up crayfish. But by the end, there was one kid in particular who was really near and dear to my heart because she screamed her head off when they put the crayfish in the tub. But by the end, that was her chosen animal, and she was going to study that animal for longer than the expedition.
Event.
And I told her I was really proud of her to stretch outside and to do something that's probably scared her a lot, but like she did it and she was going to run with that. I thought that was really cool. So I really think you guys taking this class is awesome, and you offering the class is really cool because I think we have a lot of kids in Shorewood that have opportunities that are just incredible when it comes to environmental science. You know, just noticing as you walk around the things that are around us. I think that's awesome.
So I just had a question about I love that you call it adventures, and so I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about so you did rock climbing, that's the first one. So what are the adventures
what are the
that
next
you're
two?
going to go on in the next ones?
Our next one, we're gonna be up in Door County, and we're gonna be like kayaking and canoeing, and I think surfing.
If the
Weather-
conditions
weather
are
permitting.
right.
Conditions are right.
Okay.
That's our next one.
Yeah, that's our water
That's
trip.
our water trip.
Basically. And then Bethel Horizons is a backpacking experience that should be very fun. I don't think either of us can go on that one, so we don't know much about that one, but backpacking, which should be a beautiful experience. Sad I can't go. And then Tree Haven, I think
That's
mostly
Tomahawk.
that's in Tomahawk, Wisconsin, and I think that's mostly about like observing the environment around us. Would say.
Yeah, and winter exploration,
camping.
winter camping,
See
if
kind
I
of
can
like
survive.
winter ecology, which is an
Yep.
adventure in and of
Yep.
itself.
Survival?
No cotton, stay dry.
That's right.
the key,
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
It's great. Yeah, it sounds fantastic. So, but with our next
Awesome.
board retreat, we know who to
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
ask to take us.
Adventure ed, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you guys
so
so
All right,
much.
thanks, everyone.
Well done.
Really nice.
Okay. So next up is public comments. Number one, all the other opportunities for public comments. Okay. So we have one district operations that we're going to discuss. So we asked the district to provide some clarification on our programming. And so we're going to talk about single grade and MAC programming.
Yes, so Tim Joint is here to talk about the single grade and MAC structures for classrooms. So him and I had an opportunity to meet with teachers, both single age teachers and multi-age single grade teachers and multi-age classroom teachers from both Lake Bluff and Atwater last week. And so we just want to be able to provide you with some perspective on what that conversation was, and then work through any questions. Yes, so we have Kathy Daniels, who's coming up from Atwater, and then Amy Miller from Lake Bluff. So along with Tim Joint. So Tim, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have Amy and Kathy here. They were part of a team that got together on August 21st. We kind of narrowed down some of the questions that the board wanted some answers to, up to and including why do we have multi-age and single grade classrooms? What are the similarities and differences between multi-age and single grade? And then what are the differences between MAC and Lake Bluff? MAC at Lake Bluff and Atwater. So we got together and again, kind of focusing in on trying to get our answers that are clear and concise and repeatable and communicatable by all parties involved. So we also had principals there, so that as they're beginning to plan their days of talking to K-5 parents, how do we make sure that we have clear, consistent messaging over and over? So while we did answer these questions, we also felt it was important that we actually get back together in later January, I think is what I sent out, with principals again to talk about, so what are our plans for talking to K-5 parents? What do those look like? How do we ensure that the messaging is clear and consistent? So looking at those three questions, the why do we have multi-age classrooms and single grade classrooms? We tried to start with the why. The two programs give options to meet individual needs for our students regarding the length of time students stay with their teachers and fellow classmates, and then include the history of multi-age classroom as well, starting at Atwater years ago. It was actually really interesting because Noelle Shanks, who was on our group, actually after we met, sent me a Venn diagram of similarities and differences that was created by Bonnie Haber. So, and the really interesting part was it aligned exactly with what we are portraying right now in our answers, is that it really does have a lot to do with time that students are with their teachers and other classmates. And so it was really kind of nice and helpful to look at a historical document that matched exactly what we were having a discussion about. What are the similarities and differences between MAC and single grade classrooms? We felt what was really helpful was to kind of do, here's what's the same, here's what's different. You're going to see LB and AW after those. So what's the same? The curriculum, EL is the same at both of them. The schedules in terms of lunch, recess, and specials are the same. And administrative support for both programs is the same. What's different is going to be the number of students in the class, or the number of teachers in the class, particularly at Lake Bluff. And again, we try to make that clear by saying there's about 20 to 25 students with one teacher in one classroom in our single grade classes, and 40 to 50 students, 2 teachers, 2 classrooms combined with our multi-age students. And the numbers of years that they're with the teacher, both at Lake Bluff and at Atwater. So a single grade classroom is going to be 1 year with the teacher, a MAC classroom is going to be 2 years with those teacher or teachers.
Could I ask why at one point was it decided that Lake Bluff would have significantly larger MAC class than Atwater? Just out of curiosity.
I'm going to go with an assumption, going back to our original, and so at any point in time, just feel free to say, like, that's incorrect.
Why don't you have the experts talk
Yep.
about the history of it? That would be.
Well, I can say that when multi-age started at Lake Bluff, it was with Fawn Mahaffey, and she was a teacher who had come from MPS and had some experience with Montessori and had a desire to co-teach. And so it was with that desire to co-teach that the multi-age evolved to what it is today. And so the first year, she had a first grade class. The second year, Kelly Cassidy, who is still in that multi-age classroom, joined her, and they were the first multi-age classroom at Lake Bluff. And then the second year, Kitty Moore, Catherine's her first name, Kitty Moore taught third grade, and then had Mike Roberts join her. And so then what happened was teachers opted to co-teach. I think that was the crux of it.
So the numbers are driven by the 2 adults.
Right,
Yeah.
and no one was, what was really integral to that is that teachers chose to teach like that. They wanted that, and in order to accommodate that, then here is what the structure of this classroom is going to be.
And it might have went back to the fact that Atwater, when multi-age first started in Shorewood, which was at Atwater, it was 3 grades. It was grades 1, 2, 3, and it was 2 teachers together in the same classroom.
Actually, back in the early 80s, there was a 1st and 2nd grade class, or 2nd and 3rd grade class. That I was there.
Prior to that.
Just it was a year.
That was Barb McCann.
That was
Barb McCann and Deb Sakai. Deb Sakai still teaches, and Barb stayed with the 1-2, and Deb went up with what became the 3-4. So.
For the record, those were gonna be my assumption answers.
And that detail too.
Yeah, with that, yeah, absolutely. And then what are the differences in MAC at Lake Bluff and Atwater? And that's where you get into the differences, Pablo, that you described of there's 2 teachers, 2 classrooms at Lake Bluff, whereas at Atwater there's 1 teacher for 2 smaller subsections of those courses that total 1 classroom. And so then we left the what are the outcomes of the 2 programs based on school board policies for those reports.
So I have a couple of questions. I guess I was not expecting the answer to why we have it to be around the length of time students stay and their fellow, like who their fellow classmates are, because that's could be done in lots of different ways. Like it doesn't have to be done this way. It could just be done in multiple ways.
Do a cohort model.
And I guess is that the kind of thing you differentiate? Like, is that the kind of thing that is found to like make a difference in how students learn, or is there preferences around that? Because the co-teaching comment actually was what I was expecting to be the driver. That we wanted 2 teachers in a classroom. I guess that's the Lake Bluff model. I like this idea of co-teaching. So I guess I thought that was an interesting answer, and I guess I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, and I think, so the length of time that a student is with a teacher can have a tremendous effect on that student, depending on that student's personality. So occasionally some students will find, and as you look at which one of the results that really kind of gets into, I would actually say it's probably more the R4, that wellness piece, and that connectedness with their teacher. Some students are going to have a really great experience being able to stick with a teacher or teachers for multiple years, and other students need that fresh start every year. And so that's really why there's the 2 options for those students, and looking at that time that they're with those teachers and classmates, and will I see that same cohort of students every year, every other year, or is it going to mix up every year? And sometimes I need that difference, and sometimes I need to know that Sam's in my class this year and Susie's in my class next year, and then Sam's in there next year and Susie's in next year. So it's really a student preference in terms of those cohort and time-based pieces.
So are we able to evaluate the differences between the way we're delivering multi-age between the 2 schools? Because really what's different is the way what is the impact of 1 teacher versus 2 teachers? Because that's the variable that we're not accounting for. You know what I mean? At Atwater, it's a 1-2, it's a single teacher. What is the student-based result? What outcome is different for a student by having 2 teachers for 2 years versus 1 teacher for 2 years? I mean, I'd be curious about that. And how do we, as a district, then, is it a parent choice? Because I don't really know what my kid's learning style is until it's too late to figure out if I made the right decision. So that's one thing at the beginning. And or is this just kind of anecdotal, what you happen to hear from whoever your neighbors are, or teacher-driven, or whatever? So how do we ensure that we're having the students who need a particular structure get a particular structure? Is the district dictating it? Is the parent dictating it? I think there's a lot of questions around this that we have to address.
I just, as a former MAC parent and current MAC teacher, and I think that this is what our colleagues have said consistently, if it's right for the parent, it's right for the student. And so a parent makes a choice based on what they experience, or if they visit the classroom, if they have an idea, and that has always been, I think it's been like this is the week to come and visit and sit in and see what you think would be best, because no one knows better than the parent. I think what we have really strove to do is to make sure that it's not, this is right for this child and this is right for that child, because I don't think that that's the case. If it's not right for the parent, then the setting won't be right for the student.
Well, I would actually take issue with that a little bit and say, as the experts in terms of education, if you see a student that has difficulty in a particular environment, I would think your opinion would weigh rather significantly and appropriately to me as a parent if you would say, you know what, Joanne, I think your kid's struggling because I think the big Mac classroom at Lake Bluff is too much stimulus for them. They're having a problem with the socialization or whatever. I think they do better in a single grade classroom. I think that's feedback I would need to have from a teacher, that I as a parent would be hard pressed to make that determination without somebody giving me some feedback, other than my kid saying, I don't like school, and that's not enough.
Right.
I know our teachers have conversations with the parents about this. So at the kindergarten level, the decision is made. And I know the kindergarten teachers kind of work with the parents to decide what really might be best in this situation, because not all the parents would necessarily know exactly how their child's going to react to it.
I think that's a difference, if I can just interrupt for a minute. I think that's a difference, though, between if that's done at Atwater. I don't think that's done at Lake Bluff to a reasonable measure, because, you know, when my older daughter was making the decision, her kindergarten teacher told me, I can't help you. It's a parental decision. When my younger daughter, when we were making the decision for her, I knew what I wanted to do, but our teacher said, you know, I think she would do good in either one, and I think it's your decision. That's not, I mean, and for my older daughter, we made the decision based on what I thought as a parent was the right decision, and it wasn't for her. It was a disaster for her. So I think, to Joanne's point, we need to be able to be somewhat accountable, because, you know, really, we made the decision based on looking at her cohort of friends too, because you know, like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And that, yeah, that works to a certain extent. But for my older daughter, the decision in kindergarten, what we thought she would be able to succeed in, changed, and it's really hard. I don't care what anyone says; it's really hard to switch, because we have established Mac and the community that is great for those Mac kids. And it's great for those parents, and it's, you know, like, that's fantastic that you get those kids for 2 years, and if that works, awesome. But when it doesn't, you are not, it's like being ripped, you know, it's like my daughter had the perspective that she should have just gone to a totally different school. And I think that is shared by other kids that have moved out of Mac, or other kids that have switched between the two, and I think we as a school and we as a district need to be better about bridging that. I think we have done better. I think that the community crew and the cross-age crews and all that stuff, I think, is a great start. But I don't like the impression that MAC is the choice to make. And this is more at Lake Bluff than at Atwater, I think. But I don't like the impression that MAC is the choice to make. Single age, you know, well, single age is there if you don't want to choose MAC.
I think that we owe it to our school community to really communicate that that isn't a perception that teachers hold. And so one of the things that this group is going to do is, when there is that K-5 meeting, we're showing up.
Which I think is fantastic.
And so it's Karen, myself from Lake Bluff, and Kathy.
And then Noelle Shane's also from Atwater.
And so we're going to be there, because that is something that we clearly need to communicate, that there isn't, the differences are time with the teacher, and that's really what we want to stress. And so you have to, you know, we'll share whatever parents want to know, but it isn't, what I heard you say, Hillary, is that there is a choice, and there's a one choice and the other choice, and they are equal.
Do you think, though, that other than the 2 years of being with the same teacher, because I know there are great things happening across our schools in terms of co-teaching, in terms of building that younger-older relationship across different grades and different rooms and different things. But do you think that that's equitably shared across MAC and single age at Atwater and Lake Bluff? You know, because in some respects, I think we have 4 different schools in some ways between the 2 elementary schools and the different programming that we offer. So do you think in any way that all of the things that we are doing in terms of EL and crew building, community, is hampered by having those 2 programs in the school?
No, and I think the key piece that, since I've gotten here, that I've really strived to do, has been to get grade levels together as we look at curriculum, as we look at those pieces of what are we going to guarantee within our grade levels. And that includes MAC teachers and single grade teachers, and it includes resource sharing, and it includes here's what I've done that works, here's what I've done that works. So that's been a real focus for me, is to, when you look at what's the same, the curriculum and the EL, like those pieces should start to mold together. Are there going to be little differences here and there? Absolutely. And that would be true of a straight grade teacher to a straight grade teacher and one set of MAC to another set of MAC. And so it's kind of this strengthening, loosening of like, let's make sure that we have fences for our boundaries, and the art of actually teaching within those fences is up to you because you're a wonderful teacher and that's what we need to allow for. But we do need to stay within these fences, and that's an important conversation to have across grade levels throughout schools. So as we're talking about character, we're talking about it as a Lake Bluff team, as an Atwater team. As we're talking about curriculum, we're talking about across grade levels, across district. And so that has been something that I have tried to make sure is part of our conversation as we move forward.
Has there been any, I'm sure the data is available, to disaggregate this data by groups so that we can see what the proficiencies are amongst subsets of students? Because part of me also wonders, are people selecting in or out based on being in the district and knowing more, or being non-residents, or different
Which data are you looking at?
ethnicities? All of the proficiency
We're going to get
data.
to that.
Yeah.
Under the results.
Yeah.
Can I have a question about, so I appreciate the history. I guess one of the questions I had was like, so at what points have the teachers and the district thought about like why we continue to do MAC in single grade? Like if somebody were to say, so why do we, 20 years, lots of things have changed in 20 years, why do we still do it?
One way it was revisited probably about 10, 12 years ago. I joined, you were at this meeting, so I don't remember it. And so we were having a discussion at Atwater with parents whether or not to continue MAC in the 5th and 6th grade. So this was where we brought the community, the parents and teachers, and really looked at what do we want as a school going forward. So we have taken at times looks at that.
Yeah.
So that was the last time, 10 years ago?
It was probably more than 10 years ago because my youngest is 20.
No, I wouldn't say that's the last time. In the last couple of years, probably about 2-3 years ago, we were discussing this in the lounge today. I think it was 2-3 years ago we were discussing multi-age, looping, single grade, different options, and that had come up about 3 years ago where there were some discussions when we were first looking into EL, and that was amongst teachers and staff. I don't think that ever made it to kind of parents discussion. So it's come back up over time too.
And what's your position on, oh, go ahead, sorry. I mean, I guess what's as the director of curriculum, like what's your position on revisiting why we do what we do?
Yeah, no, I think we certainly could. I would say that the why that we have in terms of time unfortunately it's timeless in terms of a why, right? So there is some advantages to continuing to offer different opportunities for students to get the needs that they need met. And whether that mean multiple years with the teacher or single grade, I don't know if I'd see a dramatic change in like, you know what, let's not do that anymore, because there is some specific needs within teachers. Could we look at it again and say, do we want to re-up this? Absolutely. I feel confident that we'd probably look at it and say, do we want to re-up this? And I think most of our teachers would say, yeah. But we certainly could. I have not done it since I've been here.
I mean, I guess I'm just bringing it up as like, as somebody who, I think it's probably a good thing to revisit, right?
Yep.
I think we should have an answer when somebody says, so why do you still do something?
Mm-hmm.
I think other than because we always have, I think is
right.
Not a good answer. And it sounds like there are other ways to do, like I don't know what looping is, but it sounds like there's other things out there. And I think it would just be, I think something to consider because we've also, EL has really shifted like some of the things that happen in terms of in the classroom for all the grades, right, for single and multi-age. And so it would be an interesting conversation to know, like, is this still the best way to do, for students to have time with their 2 years with teachers potentially, still meet that like need, and if this is still the best way, and maybe, I don't know, but I think it's something that should be examined.
Well, and is there a reason to have it so different between the two schools, right? We've done a lot to normalize and to have better communication and better, equality across the schools and making everything efficient and everything the same. But this is a pretty big difference to have between our two schools. So is there an academic and, reason to continue to have such two wildly different programs? And part of me thinks like, well, if it's so advantageous for students to have a teacher 2 years, well then let's do that. Let's loop all those classes and let's loop all of them, but let's look at those class sizes because, 42 kids or 50 kids, that's a lot of kids in a class, even with 2 teachers. So I appreciate this information. I don't know, there was one parent that stuck out at me at the Lake Bluff meeting last year for the kindergartners who just asked, why? What's the philosophy between doing this? And I'm not sure, to be quite honest, that the page of information would have answered her question. What's the philosophy? What's the educational philosophy between having these 2 programs? And, yes, we can say, well, because you get to stay with the teacher for 2 years and you get to have team teach, the teachers get to team teach, but is that enough? Would that have answered her question? I don't know, but I have to say I don't know that this would have. So I just want to reiterate, I'm really glad that you guys are going to be at the meeting. I hope that the longevity of the 2 programs is talked about, because that changes, right? I mean, when some of my 4th grade parents heard that in 4th grade single age you switch classrooms, they were like, what? I didn't know that happened. I didn't know that was in preparation for middle school. I didn't, and so I think the picture of when you're making that decision in kindergarten, it's not just 1st grade, it's 6 years of, what does 6 years of single age look like? What does 6 years of math look like?
At Lake Bluff.
At Lake, well, and at Atwater though, because it changes, right?
Well, and Atwater, MAC really only goes up to
4th grade, right, it only goes through 4th grade.
Well,
that is one difference.
Straight
and I think that's an important
Single grade.
difference. That's a pretty big difference. So I think, yes, but even then, for those kindergarten parents at Atwater, to have that full picture of this is what it looks like through your time in elementary school. It's not just 1st grade, right? Because there's a whole many more years. You're here for a long time, and this is what your day looks like, and this is what you're going to look like. Your classes are going to look like through the longevity. I think that's helpful to parents. I think that's, I know I was very like, God, my kid's going to be in 1st grade. This is so important. This is, and I'm looking very narrowly, and now it's like, oh, wait a minute. There's a whole other group of things, and there's a whole other things to consider. So I hope as we think about ways to educate parents that we kind of expand a little bit, that it's bigger than just 1st grade. You're not just making this decision for 1st grade, you're making it for all of your time at elementary school.
I'd be curious to see as well if our intermediate school teachers can identify any differentiation from students depending on which of the 4 delivery systems they came from. Because to your point, they are kind of like 2 schools at Lake Bluff, single age and multi-age at Atwater through 4th, and then the big mix, and then at 5th and 6th it's a traditional approach. And I'd be curious to see if they notice a difference in terms of what the students bring to that transition. And that might be a helpful piece of information to get to try and ascertain some of these underlying value pieces, right?
Right. I mean, that would be very interesting. I don't know. Talk to teachers at SAS, and some have said yes, some have said no. Thankfully we have really smart kids who figure it out and, transition okay. But that would be really interesting.
I think along those lines, if you look at the results that we'll be looking at a little bit later tonight, we'll see that, MAC outperforms in some areas and snapshot. So to keep that in mind, I think along those lines, as a board, we've asked that we separate out MAC versus single age in terms of results. But as I prepared for today and I was reading a little bit more on multi-age classrooms, one of the things that really stood out to me, and I think what you're hitting at, Hillary, is that we just need to articulate better the philosophy, the rationale behind the 2 different or 4 different offerings that we have and why they are great. And what I've told parents is really you can't go wrong. Single age, multi-age, we've got great teachers, we've got great curriculum. You're going to be fine in my kids went single age, but they would have been fine in multi-age. So I think it's a matter of articulating that. But along the lines of separating out in the results policy, I think what stood out to me in the literature that I was reading was that piece about empathy and character development and the older kids working with the younger kids and being role models as young as 2nd grade, working with the 1st graders, helping them with their math, really strengthens their understanding. When you teach someone something, you retain it longer. And I think we've seen hints of that in the results, but I think if we're going to tease it out in the results policy for academic mastery, we should probably do it out also for character, because we look at character, and maybe there's a difference that we're not even knowing to look at. If we're going to tease out,
Don't have access to individual student survey results.
Right, you don't have that data.
Yeah, so we'll have to look at the indicators. That'll be something that we can come, when we bring those results back, we'd have to,
for
we'd have
bringing
to look
that
at
is
that.
to really ascertain what's going on. I think we need more of a mixed methods approach and not just looking at the data from the results is enough to decide, wow, multi-age kids at Atwater, they had the highest score, so we're gonna just convert everybody to that small class multi-age across the board, because I don't think that's where we're going, but I think, looking at, and I guess the question would be for the 2 multi-age teachers here anecdotally, or what have you seen or what do you see as the value of what I'm hitting at with the character and the empathy building and all that? Do you notice something compared maybe to the years that you taught as a single age teacher? Can you speak to that for a minute?
I taught 1 year 7th grade language arts at SIS, and then I've been in Mac 3, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But I think Karen could just as well sit up here as a single grade teacher and say, here are the benefits. Yeah. And so I don't know why I feel leery about carrying the water of why I think multi-age is great, because it kind of feels like this is why this is great, and it's comparing in a way that I trust Karen and my single grade colleagues implicitly. And so how do we do this? How do we tell this story without saying this is better than this? And so I can tell you that what I find great value in about bringing my olders back, and I can give you anecdotal stories from today, but I don't know why I feel like I want to caution us as a group.
Well, I think there's value in if it's simply a matter of this is my preferred way of teaching as a teacher, and that the outcomes are not any different. That's not an unsupportable position. I actually have less issue with that than us are trying to articulate some philosophical underlying value that just simply isn't there. That we have good teachers, and whether you take this approach or that approach, it doesn't matter. It's a question of where you think your child might thrive based on a particular structural piece, and that the teacher has a preference. I don't frankly take issue with that if that's the reality of it.
I'll jump up on this table and say, I'm teaching the way I want to teach. Karen would join me and say she's teaching the way she wants to teach. And that's really the crux of it.
For employee safety services, we're not going to have them actually jump on the table. I just want to be really clear about that, because Pat's in the back, and in risk management.
And I say that because that's really a big difference, a huge difference. So, and then that gives, that puts any other ways of approaching it really as a operational decision-making process, which
So-
is exactly the reality that we're talking about.
So what I've seen too, just in being in both settings, is that because students and a teacher would be in a single grade setting, doesn't mean they all automatically miss the mentoring type of opportunity. It's just done in a different way.
Correct.
So you just have to structure it a little bit different way. And that's again where I like the idea that we have two different approaches, that we can make sure that we have some expectations, certainly from the board, and from a curricular standpoint, we have consistency, but we have professionals who are very good in their classrooms that can work through, and we can support the artistry of what they're doing, making sure that we do have some results that we'll bring back to the board, but that we can also kind of work with them in. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that I don't think I think it's done in a different way, that it's not necessarily like one's missing out and the other one's getting that. So
I
it's
should
just different
clarify,
like that.
and my
But that's
kids
not
have
how we
spoken to
present
this,
it.
they've gone and worked and
That's
read
right.
with the younger
That's
kids. I think my daughter's in crew with you, even though she's in 3rd grade. So they've gotten that, but it's something that jumped out in the literature about multi-age. And I will say, another thing I really appreciate about what our teachers do is the co-teaching and collaborating. Often we're accused as a profession of kind of working in a silo and, teaching
And that
our
happens
own
in
way.
I
ours.
was gonna say, I was a straight grade teacher, and just to be clear, that happens in straight grade or middle.
No, I know, it happens,
Absolutely.
it's 4th, 5th, and
Silos
6th
come in
grade
all
at
shapes
Mike
and
Block.
sizes.
My son has had the benefit of having 2 different teachers that he jumps between, and it's been wonderful. I think it's fantastic, so I would just wanted to kudos to that co-teaching and that collaboration that goes on
Well,
in multi-age and civil ed.
The other thing too is if you're at Atwater, there's actually co-teaching at the 5th and 6th grade levels because they specialize by discipline, and so the kids just move around 3 teachers. So it's a different way of. So we're talking about variations on a theme, and I think we're not doing an effective job of communicating what we do and why we do it, and that people in the community have some mistaken apprehension that one is better than the other because we're not doing a good job of articulating why we do it. And if we say we're doing it because this is a teacher has a preference and we have the luxury of being able to, or the willingness as a district to do many different things as long as they all meet the needs of the kids, then I think that's awesome. And that distinguishes us maybe from a district that won't do that. But we can't keep looking for something that doesn't exist simply as a way to justify it. We got to be candid about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And no offense to Pablo, Amy, I appreciate your hesitancy to answer his question because I think that gets to the competitiveness and this is better than this and this, that infiltrates everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate that you're sensitive to that. I'm curious, so both of you being math teachers, or you're saying
No,
yeah,
Kathy's not.
Kathy's.
Never has been.
Straight grade teacher,
Straight
and
grade
now
teacher.
interventionist.
So the decision of bringing all those teachers to the table and being sort of the mouthpieces, if you will, as to why we have all these differences, I think is really important. And I want parents to identify that you are there talking about that it is your preference to teach this way and that this is just, that these are the same things. Because I think frequently it is just it's similar to what we have across many different problems in our world,
Right.
where people
Learning
get into
styles.
labels and people get into that this is better and this is this. I'm not going to talk to you because you're a Republican. I'm not going to talk to you because you're a Mac parent or whatever. And I think as much as we can to build that community and to have those conversations about one's not better, one is just different, and the other one's different. And our teachers are doing the exact same thing. Curriculum's the same. Opportunities are the same. Yes, you might have a teacher for 2 years. Yes, you might be in a bigger classroom with 2 teachers. But I think we need to own that and put that out there a little bit more because otherwise it's left to parents and it's left to sort of, not clear pictures and preferences and opinions. And I would like to be able to better educate parents about the differences, particularly when you're making that choice or working with a teacher to make that choice. So I'm very glad that you guys are doing this.
So I think that in meeting, we really tried to work within the operational expectations. But what I hear is you're granting us permission to be people and to say, we're doing what we love to do in the situation we love to do it in.
Right.
So.
Well, and I want to hear that from you, I want to hear that from Karen, I want to hear that from, you know, any teacher that is really proud of the work that they do every day. Because to me,
It doesn't invalidate
that
the
is how I want to
utility.
make, right,
Yeah.
right.
Allowing teachers to do what they love is a weed for
Thank you.
personnel.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
all.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have a couple of items on our superintendent's action agenda. Up first is the 2018-2019 teacher salary schedule.
Yeah, so I'll have Patrick Miller, and then Amy's going to stay up as the SEA president. So,
Oh, go ahead. I'm going to take a motion.
oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the teacher salary schedule as presented.
I second that.
Okay. Patrick,
Good evening.
good evening.
Good evening.
It's my pleasure to come before you tonight and present the, for your approval, the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement between the Shorewood Educational Association and the Shorewood School District. What you have before you tonight is the culmination of several collaborative meetings between the SEA and district administration. And very happy to say that its appearance in a meeting in October is not indicative of when this work was actually completed, and it's the 4th consecutive year that we've actually had this work completed prior to the end of the school year, which to me is
Really
fantastic. So you see the information in front of you, you can read that, I don't need to read that to you. What I would like to do is yield the microphone to Amy Miller from the SEA and have her give you her opinions or her views on the work that we did.
Thanks, Patrick. First of all, would like to acknowledge that there are many Shorewood teachers in the audience who came tonight, and so if you are a proud Shorewood teacher, or if you're a Shorewood teacher, can you just give a wave? All right, excellent.
And the room tips this way.
So we truly appreciate being valued as highly qualified professional staff. We view your maintenance of steps and lanes as an intentional expression of our investment in your investment in our ongoing growth and development. Our members cite the presence of steps and lanes as one of the most important factors that has either brought them to the district or kept them here in the teaching profession. In 2016 at the Shorewood School District Summit, in which themes were prioritized for the year 2025, number 4 on the list was a well-compensated, high-quality teaching staff. Clearly, meeting the highest priorities of authentic learning and support for the whole child come directly from the roles we play in our schools here in Shorewood. We are here today to thank you for your investment in our profession. That investment in your teachers is a direct investment in Shorewood's children, families, and our community. Despite the best intentions, though, our salaries are not keeping up with inflation. Even though tonight you're approving a 2.13% increase to the salary schedule, every cell received less than 2.13% over last year's salary. The reason for this is that the annual increase is calculated on base wages from 2011 rather than the last year's salaries. In addition to this, other factors have eroded take-home pay for many teachers over the last 5 years. This is very concerning for our membership. We would like to engage in analysis and conversation with you around these issues in the coming months. We realize across the educational landscape, the relationship we have with our administration and the school board is very unique in its collaboration. We look forward to our future dialogue about this. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks,
Thank
Amy.
you. Thank you to all the teachers who came. Any further comment or question? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thanks.
approval of monitoring results 2 for English language and reading.
I move that we approve monitoring results for.
I second.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
All right. Before you is the ELA, our first document that we have in our whole academic mastery, our 2.1, starting with ELA. If you can quickly just look at the actual table itself, I want to just explain how those got filled in. So fall of 2017 was the data, the baseline data was given to you last year, as well as a target that I created based off of potential ESSA legislation that was coming out, was how I tried to set those targets. So then what I filled in the middle was the fall 2018, which is the current. Now when I say current, it says fall 2018, all of those results were from the end of last academic year. So they're current data for fall of 2018, but that data actually existed at the end of last year. The percent change is then the difference between the fall 2018 and the fall 2017 data. Okay, so what's interesting to do then is to take a look at what was the target, where were we, did we hit the target, and even if we didn't hit the target, did we see a positive gain, or did we not hit the target, we saw a negative gain? Those sorts of questions are the ones that I typically take a look at as I'm analyzing them. And then lastly would be our target set again for the 2019 school year. And so that's how I fill in that one, again according to ESSA legislation, which is going to say that we need to decrease gaps over 6 years while continuing to grow every subgroup. So you'll notice they always have a growth. We're usually trying to hit somewhere around a 4% increase for some of our lowest performing subgroups is about where we're trying to get in order to close those in half. And that's just some funny calculations that you do with ESSA legislation. So that's how those got filled out and taken a look at. I also did provide some highlights in each section for each and every one of those, as well as analysis being some pain points or some areas for growth within each and every one of those as well.
Questions?
What surprised you, Tim?
You know, that's a good question, Joanne. I don't know if there was anything, let me quickly take a look at my notes, that was like jaw-dropping, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, sort of issue. I will say we took a really large jump in ACT scores this year, keeping in mind last year when I came to, we did have a lower performing ACT score than we have had historically, but this, our average was a 23.5 overall, which is, since we started doing the junior year statewide ACT, it's our highest composite ACT score in the past 4 years. So that was probably like the, wow, that's really great. So that was a big one for us.
I would say it's important also to track that cohort from some Aspire and some other tests that they had earlier in their high school career were not tracking towards a 23.
No.
Right. So I mean, there was definitely value added as these kids came through from a high school standpoint to where they ended up achieving. So higher, they ended up higher than was projected.
Our students take Aspire at 9th and 10th grade, and Aspire gives us what they predict to be the average ACT score, and we beat out that range with our 23.5 from their 10th grade ACT scores.
11th grade, right?
They take it in 11th grade.
Yeah.
And so this is where ACT gets really confusing. So this is the junior year ACT that is given one day.
Yeah.
We also receive ACT scores that is called the graduating ACT scores. That is the best ACT score that students will obtain.
From seniors.
From seniors, from graduating seniors. So it's really funky, but this data is the data that DPI gives us and then breaks down. We don't get as thorough of a breakdown from our graduating ACT data, so we've stuck with the statewide. The unfortunate part of that is it's one day, one time.
Right.
So I thought it was interesting that there was these like pretty large fluctuations for the Latino subgroup, Hispanic subgroup. Like, I mean, really large, both going up and going down. And so,
Here-
what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a low subgroup population, so single students make pretty large swings. So as you look at, for instance, the K-5 through 2 high frequency words, that Hispanic population, that subgroup is 25 students. So each student is making a 4% swing, depending on where they're at. So in order to get to that, you're looking at 6 kids. Swinging one way or the other. Right, so that's, break it down to K-5 through 2, that's 2 kids at each grade level.
Is that the same for the 7 through 12 in terms of?
7 through 12, you're looking at about a 48 student subgroup, so you're looking at a 2% swing each time. So again, 7 through 12, a 14%, you're looking at 7 students. That's approximately 1 student per grade level. 7, 8, 9, 10,
7, 12.
Can you,
Wait. So, sorry, I just want,
Yep.
so
So it's
you
added stuff.
count all 48, I mean, all 48 students are included in this category.
Correct.
So to say that, I mean, yeah, each student is definitely, I mean, 1 or 2 students in a small, I mean, in a mean, in an average,
Yep.
obviously can pull it. But it's not, I mean, I guess it's not like you're only looking at, I think that's misleading to say it's 1 student per grade, right? I mean, I think.
Correct, yes,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
That's just how
Right. Yeah, but
in
it's.
my mind, I start to look at things as I'm, particularly when I start to target set, because what I don't want to do is set us up when I target set for, all right, so let's actually look at what does this somewhat look like, and what I don't want to do is say by grade level, that means each grade level has to have 20
No,
students.
right, I know, yeah.
Right, and so that's just, in my mind, how I do things. You're correct in that that subgroup is gonna vary from grade level to grade level, so.
I mean, I think that, so the thing that suggested to me is that there's like these, right, cohorts of students right now that we're picking up at each of these grade levels. And we only have 2 time periods, 2 time points, which means there's no trend line. Like we have no idea which way things are actually going.
Right.
So I get that, but then I noticed that, like, for example, in indicator 3, you dropped the target from 89 to 77. And so, I mean, I guess maybe talk a little bit about how you decided to do the targeting, I guess.
Yeah, and so what I did with the targeting was I looked at where we were currently at. The other piece of this is we do lose a cohort of students each time, right? So we gain a cohort and we lose a cohort. So there is always gonna be some fluctuation with whatever we're looking at. It's not gonna be exactly the same.
It's not a static
So
group.
unfortunately,
Right.
I won't have 48 students next year within that subgroup. So
Right.
I'm doing a best guess of where
Right.
I'm setting my targets, and typically what I'm doing is basing that off of our lowest performing subgroup making the largest growth while every other subgroup continues to grow. And typically where that has landed itself is somewhere around a 4% gain for our lowest subgroups is what, as we look at ESSA legislation, is what's going to close that gap by half over 6 years. So as you look at that Hispanic population in indicator 3, you have a 73, so I'm hoping to hit a target of 77 the following
Okay.
year.
Anticipating to get to where you need to get, yeah.
So it's a slow incremental increase. I didn't go straight back to the 89 because again, I don't know what that cohort exactly looks like.
So on a practical basis, we can set a target, but what are we doing operationally differently in the classroom to then achieve that?
Yeah, and so that's what I'll get at with my next steps when I
Okay,
introduce
I'm
Kate's
ahead of
master.
myself, sorry, okay.
is there any reason you can't add, for next year, next time we look at these, the ends for each group?
I absolutely can have that. If it's an N below 10, that's when you're gonna see an NA.
Yeah.
That's fine. All right, any other questions on the monitoring report before we?
Yeah, quick question on in the appendix R 2.1, under 3rd through 4th grade. Shouldn't the sample size for the combined Shorewood, I'm just wondering if that's off.
Is that for the
wait,
next
we're not on
steps?
that, we're not on that yet. Do you have anything else about this, Pablo?
We're looking at the
That's,
reading.
this is the,
Appendix.
is the appendix to this report?
The appendix to this report is on a separate document, correct?
Oh, so that is part of this
I'm
report.
not looking at
Sorry.
this.
Yeah.
Yes,
Go ahead,
it-
sorry.
yep, I looked at that, that's not correct, because they're not adding up.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right, so it should add up to the, 170 instead of the 300.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so do people have any other questions about the appendix? So I guess, the appendix is looking at MAC and single age broken down.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things you said was there's a negligible difference that could be explained through a multitude of reasons. So
Yeah, like what?
yeah, like what?
Yeah, so ultimately, I think this is where we get into the discussion of, so when do we consider a gap to be closed? And so for us to quite honestly say that we're going to have the exact same proficiency
Sure.
across two programs is where I would go, now we're getting really nitty gritty. But a 4% difference could easily be due to selection bias, could be due to that cohort of students, could be due to I guess I'm gonna say it again, a multitude of reasons. So I was going within 5-6% is kind of where I'm like, okay, within that group, I'm somewhat okay with there being some differences that any number of variables could have caused, could have been, I mean, all the way down to a flu bug, right?
Sure.
So I don't know if I can necessarily say, I know why that 4% gap is happening.
Okay, and then you suggested that it's something else, I think is what you said, for the differences between Lake Bluff and Atwater, and that you were going to meet with teachers, so
Mhm.
have you done that?
No, I have not done that as of yet. I wanted to get this report out first and then meet with those teachers. I think, as we look into it and as we looked at this data, as we had the discussion about MAC and single grade classrooms, there is some important pieces to note, in that historically these gaps are not as large. And so this is a somewhat historically higher number, as well as it's important to note that we have significantly more students in intervention in our single grade classrooms than we do in our MAC classrooms at Atwater. And so there is something to be said for that, and there has been some changes to the selection process of MAC and single grade classrooms at Atwater due to those reasons of just some differences in what those classroom populations look like.
That's probably kind of footnote material that would be helpful to explain some of that, because if you have a completely different, if you have a lot of kids getting intervention, then that's not like what is going on, and it certainly runs contrary to the conversation we just had.
Correct.
Right, that piece of data on the difference between 3rd and 4th grade, in terms of proficiency or advanced in English language arts, that's a glaringly big
Mhm.
number if we're saying there's no difference in the delivery models.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, I mean, I think obviously talking to the teachers is the first step, but I
Right.
think there's one of the things that's suggested here is that there are population differences in these
Mhm.
groups.
Right.
And I think that's probably the kind of
Right.
thing that
Mhm.
Which was my
would
other
be
question
helpful
earlier.
for us
Yeah.
to know,
Yeah.
then I get that you're probably getting to pretty small numbers.
Mhm.
So I don't think we need to necessarily see all the percentages.
Which
Right.
is why I didn't footnote it, because I was getting
Right.
into pretty small numbers.
But I think you can talk about the fact that, right, like.
25% of the students are receiving, level 2 intervention or whatever versus 0 in this group. That's a piece of kind of
Mhm.
gentle disaggregation.
Yeah, or just talking about the fact that there are like significant, like there are differences that are noticeable, or right, that are like purposeful in some ways too, it sounds like, right, that there's decisions being made on which students are going based on a variety of factors, and that's gonna influence that, because I think, kind of just given what you just said, right, that this is lower than like you would have expected, and historically like this is a lower number than we've seen in the past, like I think all those things are helpful kind of context.
Right.
Because, like this will be out there now, right,
Yep.
without that context. And so I think to help to explain, like give your at least reasoning for what you think is happening, this
Yep.
point, I think is
Well,
important.
and I think to that end, there's probably value in amending this to provide that information.
Sure.
Because if someone looks at that, they're gonna, absent that information, people will fill in the blank, right? They're gonna
Sure.
decide, oh, I'm not gonna, oh, if they're recommending my kid goes there, oh, no, I don't wanna do that, I saw that data. I mean, I think we have to be really careful about that.
Right, and I did try to throw it within that paragraph below, but I think it's a little
think
difficult.
it's too
to-
murky.
Yep, understood. So I think I could probably put an asterisk
asterisk,
below it,
yep.
right underneath that data, and put
Yep.
those two pieces.
Yep.
Well, and like, I think for the board, it, like, I mean, I think a gap like this also needs to be explained to us in a way that we can say like, all right, this is something that is either, requires like immediate attention on your part, or is something that you actually understand, this, I can tell you why this is like
Right.
this, right? So that's,
Right.
I think, the other
One
part
of
of
the
that,
two.
yeah. So you
Or
did-
some combination, like maybe there's a couple things, but
Right.
we just need to better understand it.
Did you guys have that? Pablo, I think I might have asked, I might have, you were gonna ask
Was
a
that the
question, I
question?
thought so. No, that was your, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the appendix.
Yeah.
You have some additional things on the appendix that we'll get to in a minute, but, because that's a reflection on the next one, right?
Okay.
Alright, so, we can talk about things we wanna see differently in the 2019 report, but are there any other comments or discussion items for the 2018, monitoring report, which we have a motion in a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Okay, so let's talk about we'll start with your reflections, Tim, on things that you think you would like to
Sure.
do
Do
differently.
you mind if I do something super fun and introduce a teacher?
No,
No, that'd be great.
I'd love to have Kate Sebastian come up. She's a reading interventionist over at Atwater and has been working on our ELA work group to actually provide some ELA professional development at Atwater and district-wide. It's also important to note that Kate this year has been working on a new way to collect data from teachers that will combine both intervention and our collection of data for the school board in one document, and has been like a tremendous lift on her part. So she's amazing
Nice,
for that.
nice. Awesome. Yay.
Yeah.
I'm sure the teachers really appreciate it too. Yeah.
That's who's class.
Yeah.
It was fun learning some new Excel formulas. So,
That's one way
I
to
think,
describe it.
I think to your point, certainly looking at trends in data, we can take like the 20,000-foot view. But really, the work that we're highlighting at Atwater this year is getting to know the students behind that data and really making sure that we're meeting their needs. So I'm just going to quickly share with you our plan. Our work plan this year is analyzing common reading assessments so that we can inform our literacy instruction. So in alignment with that, next week, Kayla was generous enough to give us 2 days with teachers. So on Monday and Tuesday next week, we are putting together data teams, and that will consist of myself, Kathy Daniels, the math interventionist, our counselor, and our new dean of students, Ryan, as well as our ELL support. We'll be meeting with grade level teams for 90 minutes to take a look at this year's fall reading assessments and really digging into what that data is showing us as far as instructional needs. And then we'll also be using some of that time to really check in with our students from last year that received intervention and make plans for them moving forward. So the intention again is to really look at that data and plan specific instructional moves for subsets of students where we see concerning data, and really help teachers highlight those targeted instructional strategies that they'll work on for a trimester at a time. So to guide our work, we're again looking at students kind of beyond the levels. So this paints a picture of like a broad stroke of students and trends that we can look at, but behind each reading level and behind each forward score, there's a reader and a writer, and so really making sure that teachers, helping them develop their understanding of reading behaviors and expectations for students by the end of each year. So when we look at a 5th grade student, what are the things that we want them to be able to do as far as reading and writing? So we anticipate that really close examination of the data, coupled with learning more and digging deeper into what it means to be an on-level reader will really help us close gaps at Atwater between what we see in running record performance and forward data, but most importantly, really helping our students develop who they are as a reader, develop those skills, but that love and passion for reading.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Any questions for Kate about her Excel skills?
Okay. All right, every formula starts with equal.
Thanks, Kate.
So that's just kind of a look at bringing to life some of the analysis and next steps that I provided you within that next steps appendix. Those are happening at both our elementary schools as we look at Atwater and Lake Bluff. They're looking at different ways of utilizing either differentiation or data discussions around ELA standards. And we have a pretty heavy lift on ELA at our K-6 both this year and next year. Kind of reminding you that last year at SIS and SHS we did a pretty heavy lift on curriculum mapping our ELA standards, as well as including some social justice standards as well from teaching tolerance. That teaching tolerance piece will likely flow into our K-6 curriculum next year. So that'll be an exciting piece to that as well. Would you like me to go through my suggested changes then?
Well, can I ask a question about,
Yeah.
so you had in here, you noted the pattern between the running records and the forward.
Yep.
The
So
differences, yeah.
I guess I didn't maybe understand what this third data point would be.
Yeah, so I think as we look at running records and forward exam, and actually Kate and I have had a lot of discussions about running records and forward exams, and occasionally I think what can somewhat be a little bit interesting is as you look through the report, you'll notice that there's a difference between our running records percent of students that are meeting their grade level benchmarks and our forward assessment, proficient and advanced. And so what we've noticed is that occasionally what we're doing is we're kind of testing two different skills. So with our running records, while we can get to comprehension, oftentimes we don't have enough time to really dive into comprehension, whereas our forward assessment is a little bit more about what they're actually doing is they're reading, answering some questions, multiple choice, absolutely, but then there's actually a text-dependent analysis where they have to write a response.
Okay, that's hard.
So it's read, interpret, comprehend,
Develop an idea.
develop an idea, and then write about that idea. So there's two different levels of rigor that are happening there. So I guess for me, what feels like a miss would be that if we're looking at running records, well, why aren't we seeing the same thing within the forward exam? And it's really because they're assessing two different pieces most of the time. And so what we've talked about is it worthwhile to start looking into, right now, we currently use map assessment, but is that the best tool to be using? And so we want to take a look at that. Dr. Anderson and I have discussed what does that actually look like, as well as what does that look like within our intervention, how do we have those conversations? So very, very initial conversations, and I just wanted to bring that to light.
And so you don't know what the third data point would be at this point, but you're thinking
Currently,
about...
if you said, Tim, I want a third data point, I'd probably point to map testing. I think as we look at, as Dr. Anderson and I are talking about, okay, so is that really the best use of our map test? What is that actually, does that third data point either add to the conversation, or is it like another thing's being measured and makes the conversation even more difficult?
Right.
So we're really trying to narrow down on how do we make sure that our teachers get an aligned amount of data that makes sense for them and they can make instructional changes according to those pieces.
So do we have another tool that we're already using to assess the comprehension and writing component?
We do it at the start of the year, so we use map assessment at the start of the year.
Okay.
And typically what we're doing is we're setting some baseline data for our students before we get into the school year.
I guess I mean like running records. Is there something that we do in the classroom there is
For
writing and comprehension assessments, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like what I like about what we've always liked about the running records is that it's this
So much information.
so much information. It's over the whole school year versus
Right.
one data point.
Yep.
And so that's why I'm wondering. I mean, there is obviously writing and comprehension assignments, but I don't know how those are then, if and how they could be used as a
An
as a point,
indicator.
as
Yeah,
an
it's
indicator.
difficult, and it's really difficult to, again, from that standpoint, then compare them to anything else, because we
Right.
don't have a writing assessment on the forward. So what we would have is we would have a singular piece of data that informs our writing. That would be a classroom assessment. So it's a little bit wonky and that's weird. But we do, I mean, we regularly assess writing within our classrooms and report on it, absolutely.
Right, okay, so you guys you're working on what this could be. My only other question, I guess you haven't gotten this, it was this idea of including another subgroup of students. So we don't use that term though, right, with disabilities? I mean, what would you define that as?
So that's actually what DPI actually uses as their two categories.
Okay.
And so that actually is
That's the
legitimately.
standard.
So that is like a documented, we have an IEP.
Subgroup, yeah.
Correct.
That's what
Okay.
that means.
So it's a
Correct.
state mandated term of art essentially?
Correct. That's, I was using the one that I would pull down from
From their sites.
Dash or.
Okay.
Because I think, I mean, I just think that the fact, I mean, documented I think is an important, like,
Yeah.
Right.
caveat here, like, it's not that, you know, it's.
Somebody
that
has deemed
It's somebody
it.
who's getting supports and.
Right.
No.
Not
Correct.
necessarily,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Yeah,
That's correct.
so, that's correct, yeah,
Correct.
so that way we know that it's,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Well, this would speak to that previous theory about some of the other right, I mean, if you had that data, yeah, it would be
Yep.
helpful.
So, yeah, I think we should put that in, and
Yeah, I
then
agree.
Lance's idea of putting in the student body, the number of students in the categories would be helpful. Any other changes you guys wanna see for next, so are we gonna keep the, would we keep the differentiation, I guess we're gonna keep the MAC and single age as an appendix because you don't have all the data for all the same indicators, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else? No? All right, so, thank you. Let's talk about math. I will take a motion.
I move that we approve R 2.1, the math, I'm missing it, monitoring report. No, we did
No, we did.
English and language arts, R2 for ELA.
Yeah.
So R2 for math.
Yes, and I'll take a second, okay, great. Tim?
Very similar document to the ELA, just with different indicators.
Mhm.
Exact same way that you would read the table as compared to the ELA pieces. And again, I tried to do some highlights as well as some analysis for you on the cover page. That was kind of a quick look of, hey, here's what I found as I looked at this table. So with that said, I don't want to belabor the report.
So I guess I want to point out that there's I'm assuming this is an Excel math mistake, indicator 1, non-F and R. This should be minus 14.5,
Not 64%.
64.5.
Yep, that would be that is definitely an Excel issue and not a Tim Joint issue.
I don't think Excel can make that kind of mistake, but that's fine.
Yeah, I wouldn't make
Okay.
that, so that, yep, that would be my mistake, correct.
Yes, ask
So,
Kate about
can
the
I guess
reliability of
I'm-
those formulas. They're very unreliable, yeah.
I guess I'm just gonna ask a question about like how we're gonna do targets moving forward. Because again, I think, I don't know, I think there's something about, I guess for me to look at a target, let's look at indicator 3 where we go from a target of 94 to 54. That doesn't make sense, I guess, to me. Like, I get that there's gonna be differences based on the students, but to drop it 40% seems like, doesn't, I mean, I just don't, I guess I don't see the rationale for that either. I understand that you're using like every
Yep.
year is like, you know, but I mean, that just seems kind of crazy.
Yeah, so
Okay, so-
that, the difficult part is that, so
Couple
you're
of
looking at our Asian subgroup,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which has an N of 13.
I get that that's a
Right.
cohort, right? But I think to say that we're then expecting the next cohort to
Right.
only get to 54, I don't know. I mean, that's the part where I wish
Right.
there was a way for us to have
Because if
more
that's
of a
reflective of
level.
a,
Correct.
is that
And I get
reflective
that
of
we're
a
gonna go up and
singular
down
student?
from that
Right.
target, but
Right.
to like, I don't know, that's the part that I don't necessarily understand what your thinking is moving forward about, you know, like having a target versus
Right.
that's set versus moving the target.
Yep, and so so literally what I did was I took a look at the fall 2018 data and said lowest subgroup, gotta grow by 4, everybody's gotta grow, so that's how I was setting my targets this year. I agree with you, I think at some point in time, we should do a trend line of best fit and be hitting our target and going above it. I just- If I would have done that, I would have gone lower, because my trend line was going down.
I mean, yeah, there is no trend line yet, but,
Right.
okay, so can you tell me a little bit about how this ESSA works? Like in 6 years, are they gonna look at where we were at the beginning?
Yep.
Okay, so we
it's-
actually
we're gonna
need to
be
be,
terrible.
well, we actually need to be, the fall of 2017 is the starting line.
Correct.
Yes.
Fall of 2018, I believe, is the starting line, because ESSA was not passed until the late winter of last year.
Okay, so the fall,
So
I mean, so we could
what's our
use
current
this-
data is the starting line.
yeah, the fall 18 data is the starting line.
That's my understanding, correct. I will double check that, but.
Okay, so if that's the
I believe
case,
that's
I
right.
think that we need to then, at this point, only be moving the target up.
Okay.
Well, I
mean,
don't disagree.
Because there's not gonna be otherwise any, I mean, I guess we're not gonna meet the targets potentially, but.
Right, but that doesn't mean we lower it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think we can't,
Yep.
that, yeah.
I can understand.
Okay.
Yes, I completely understand. Let me double check that the baseline starts in 2018, and then we can go from there easily. And I think this will get easier as we go, especially after next year when I have 3 data points.
Yeah.
It just was difficult to do it after 2.
Well, and if we were to see one of those kind of like absurd changes on a small cohort, or a small pool, you can almost go in there and assess, okay, what changed, and
Correct.
footnote that, and then not make this radical shift.
Well, yeah, I mean, are they looking at the means in the ESSA, like in terms of what their mean?
Typically, ESSA is not going to be looking at any one of these other than forward and ACT.
But are they gonna, do they do the subgroups in ESSA?
Yes.
Because, I mean, right, the problem is anything with that, I wouldn't be surprised if actually for them, and under 20 is probably too small, because one person in this group can
Like,
totally
right.
change.
But that's what I was,
I mean, so, yeah, okay.
the student doesn't speak English.
It's good for, I guess, more
That could
context
be
to
right
understand
there.
what
Yep.
that is.
Yep.
Okay, any other comments on this or the appendix?
Just a couple questions. So just to be clear, our numbers are so low for Hispanic and African Americans in kindergarten that we don't even have data.
That is correct.
Which I think is
Worth pointing out.
That is reflective of the end of our,
in part, chapter 220.
Yep.
So I just want to
Yep, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
kind of a moment of
That's-
silence.
yeah.
Of sorts.
I totally agree, Pablo.
So everyday math.
Makes me sad.
Teachers decide after they've looked at the scores, the tests, what constitutes passing. And I'm just wondering, could the differences between years be attributed to kind of, how subjective is that decision? I mean, you sit around and go, you know what, this year passing is, we've got a really good group, so we're going to raise the bar. I'm just wondering how.
You're talking about the everyday math end of year assessment.
Yeah, how much we can look at that and say from one year to the next, we're comparing apples to apples.
Yeah, I
or-
think there's 2 things that I would say to that is, one, I think we as a district could do a better job of giving an opportunity. And that's some feedback that we got from our teachers was we need a little bit more time to sit down and talk about the grading of the end of year exam because there wasn't consistency across the board, as well as the other piece of this is just familiarity with the curriculum. So last year was year 2
Of
with the
new
curriculum.
version, yeah.
So you had your first year with implementation, second year, now I've gone through it a year and now I understand it a little better. So we would think that we've seen an upward trend, we'd continue to see that upward trend as we move forward. But I do have to say that we have gotten feedback that we do need to sit down and have a little bit of time to look at those everyday math end of attachments, sit down with our grade level partners and say, so what are we actually going to say is grade level benchmarks? Because we are seeing a little bit of discrepancy from grade to grade.
So that's on the radar for this year?
Yep, absolutely.
And then another data point we have for grades 9 through 12 are final grades, and we saw a astonishingly low percentage for both Hispanic, well, not for both, for Hispanics, Blacks, and free and reduced lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Does that's the final grade on the final exam, correct?
Indicator 4, indicator 5.
5, because he said 9 to 12.
Yeah.
Indicator 5 is on the final exam.
On the final exam, and do those correlate somewhat to course grades, or is that?
Depends on the grade.
It was, so when we sat down with high school math teachers, they mentioned that if you wanted to look at academic mastery, your best measurement would be looking at final exam mastery.
Okay.
So that's interesting because we're kind of moving away from final exams, right, in high school, or no?
Yeah, I mean,
In math,
to some
I'd say it
extent,
makes
probably
sense
this,
to me.
in its traditional sense, but we'll still have an end of the class, like, assessment
Okay.
type of thing, so there'll still be an opportunity for that.
Okay.
So then, I guess along those lines, and this question's been asked about other areas, so what kind of discussions are going to happen, especially 9 through 12 level, looking at those different subgroups, and what we can do to ameliorate that astonishingly low number?
Yeah, and I think what we have a real advantage of is, and I think, you know, it means continuing a lot of our race work conversations, as well as the beautiful part we have is we have a high school principal who's a former math teacher, who can help have those conversations as well and talk with the teachers about, so what are some solutions that we can look into. So, I mean, I would lean heavily on working with Tim Kenny and working with those teachers to have those conversations and start opening up those conversations.
And part of those will be reflected in the goal setting, the SLOs and PPGs, so the student learning objectives and the professional practice goals that staff are currently setting and then meeting with their principals on this month. So a lot of the target is around these types of gaps.
I want to say I really appreciate how these data have helped inform and how you've tied them and how teachers have used them to develop their SLOs. I think that's
Awesome.
something to be mentioned and commended. So, thank you.
Well, wait.
Oh,
Let me take
the vote.
Take a vote. Sorry. All right. So we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excuse me.
Sure. All right. So let's talk about next year. So you want to start?
Sure. How would you like to talk max single age? Would you like to have me bring up a teacher? Would you like to talk about?
Well, I
Tell
guess
us.
for the math single age, that was actually part of 2018's right appendix. So I think my comments to that would be to make sure you include similar context.
Yep.
And I think I would like to see something on our district website about, for parents about math single age. And
Yep.
if this is, I mean, I think it should be included and given that context so people understand, like, again, because it's going to be out there and people aren't going to know, like, well, what does that mean and what's going on. So, but yeah, I think those were I think I had similar questions or comments from the same.
From the ELA.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the target setting that we talked about. So it was about the next steps.
Sure. Great.
You can bring a teacher.
Great. So I'm going to bring up Johanna French from Lake Bluff, a first grade teacher.
Miss French.
And again, kind of in meeting with Kate, Johanna did something very special this summer in that she is going for her administrative license. So she worked with me this summer on actually turning the data from the board reports back into grade level data. And so she did a lot of work with the analysis of that data with me for her practicum experience. And we're also using this board presentation as part of her practicum experience
Awesome.
to show what it means to work within the policy-based
and identified students who scored below grade level at the end of K-5. And my goal is for those students to be at grade level by the end of first year. And my goal is, and what I believe is that the way I can best do this is by increasing the way I differentiate my instruction. I believe this will not only help those students that are covered by math law, but all the students in my class, both ones that need more support and the ones that need more challenge. So what I was reflecting upon last year was our current model of instruction, how we teach, or how I teach the everyday math. And it's very much the way we kind of had math at school. The majority of my lesson, or a big chunk of it, is me modeling, teaching, and the students engaging in guided practice, and me kind of differentiating my instruction as I go. If I notice that a student is struggling with something, we go through it a different way, but it's happening there. A smaller portion of my instruction is student-independent practice, and me providing differentiated instruction through small group instruction. At Lake Bluffton, at Border as well, we use a workshop model when teaching language arts. And in discussion with both other teachers and my principal, I started thinking about the idea of piloting a workshop model approach in math. And I had the opportunity to visit other schools where this is done and talk to teachers who have done it. I did research on it, watched videos of what does it actually look like, and tried to figure out what would this require and what kind of skills my students need in able to do it. The workshop model is more of the math block then looks like me providing a mini lesson, which is much shorter and engaging student guided practice, and then the majority of the lesson is spent on students doing independent practice and application problems, and me spending more time on intentional differentiation, both the activities that I provide for different groups of students and also the amount of time I can meet with students in small groups. The workshop model also at the end has a share and debrief session where you as a group or as a class talk about, where are we going in relation to the learning target, what do we need to do, tomorrow, what have we gained, and also students have the ability to kind of assess and reflect upon their own learning, which is both a way of for them to formatively assess their learning and for me to do it, which then allows me to the next day adjust my instruction. This year I'm starting to pilot this program and making changes, and I feel that it would really allow me to provide much more differentiated instruction. Also having this larger block of time where the students are actually doing math will allow for them to engage in more problem-solving activities, for them to collaborate more with each other and learn from each other, and also to develop the ability to monitor their own learning and become leaders of their learning. I also feel that it's going to allow me to have more time to have them engage in activities where they actually draw upon their conceptual understanding and their skills that they've developed and apply them to more authentic and meaningful learning activities that will then hopefully lead to more intrinsic motivation, and especially those students who struggle to view math from a different lens, because it's not so much more paper and pencil, but actually applying what you know to real world experiences.
And what are you noticing so far? And it's all anecdotal, obviously. You're piloting this, but what feels different for you?
It's very much in the beginning phases because it's first grade. So when you get first grades, it's kindergarten.
Everything's new.
In order for this model to work, you have to build at first grade you have to teach them skills.
Right.
They have to be able to work very independently. So I kind of predict the full implementation of this model happening in January. And up until then, you're building, you're teaching them the skills, both the procedural skills, but also the math skills that they need and the reflection skills. And it's a way of teaching that requires a lot more preparation and planning as a teacher. You want all those differentiated activities to be high quality activities. Not just more busy work, not just, adding a zero when you're adding, but actually activities that allow the students to use their critical thinking skills, develop deeper conceptual understanding. At the first grade level, that's not easy to find. And it's not easy for the students to access either, because even if they are decoding at a level where they can read instructions, they can't comprehend. You know, you can't give them a math problem, have them read it, figure out what to do, then do it, and then reflect, you know?
Right.
And just like,
They're
here
learning
you go,
everything.
go at it.
Yeah.
It really needs, you know, we spend a lot of time teaching them that independence and expectations, so.
I just want to say hats off for endeavoring to do this, because it just sounds like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain.
Yes, it's, but I think you get to the point where you realize, you know, what I'm doing is not working for the students. And so I need to do something different. And I really appreciate that I work in a district and I'm supported by the administration that lets me do this and try it.
Well, I'd love you to come back in January and tell us how it's going, because it'd be interesting to hear what your sense is of this, because obviously if you think it's effective, I'm sure that you're going to have lots of other math teachers who are going to say,
Well,
hey.
the first grade teachers who want to hear more about
Yeah.
it.
And I'm not the only, I mean, because I spent a lot of last year speaking to my colleagues.
Of course.
And all of them were like, yes, this, you know.
You go do that and let us know how it goes.
Yeah, you know, they're eager to jump on, you know, and try, everyone's eager to try new and different things if we think it's going to benefit the students.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So in terms of analysis and next steps, again, I think the important piece is we are heading into year 3 of our across the board new math that we adopted K-12 3 years ago. So that's certainly helped a lot. And we do have specific teachers focusing on some of their SLOs, either on ELA or math practices. So there's kind of that, right? You can't do lots of things really well, but focus on one thing and do that really well. And so Johanna, in her case, is looking at math. Our math teachers, 7-12, will also focus their student learning outcomes off of data on an SLO.
Tim, I know you're not reporting out specifically on this question, but the biggest change in my mind in terms of the math curriculum was at the high school, when we got rid of integrated math and went back to the more, you know.
In terms of the biggest change,
It's a totally different.
yeah, I mean that. Yes,
curriculum
correct.
model.
Yeah, in terms of what it looked like before compared to what it looks like now, yeah, I could get on board with that.
Just
sure.
just kind of high level. What's the feedback that you're getting in terms of people's satisfaction with making that shift, right? Because it was a departmental, right? We want to go this direction.
Yeah, and I think what it has allowed us to do in a weird way is actually align a lot with what other districts and schools have available, which we didn't have before. So it was this really weird. If you move into our district, you had geometry, great.
Now what do I
Now
do?
you're in 3.
Yeah.
What's 3? It's got a little bit of everything. And so it was difficult to move out, move in. It's a little bit easier for our students to find where they're at, get help if
Outside
need
of
be
school.
outside of school. If you know, hey, I'm in geometry and I'm on this chapter, rather than I'm on this portion of geometry and then
I'm in week 4 of math 3. Yeah.
All right, and then what your suggested changes was adding the students with disabilities again. And then you want to take out a couple of.
Yeah, so as we look through those, we have 2 indicators, both indicator 1 and indicator 3 are literally 1 grade level of students. So it's really difficult, to your point, to set any sort of target on it, because literally the entire cohort flips the following year. So to your point of how did you go from 94 to 54, because it was a completely different cohort of students, and then I'm going to have to set another target for a completely different cohort of students. So if we could fold that into, so if we can fold 3 into 2, which I can do, we'll get a larger subgroup population, which will make it easier for us to set those targets. 1 is just difficult.
Could you put 1 into 2 as well? And just have it K5 through 6? I don't know what the checklist looks like.
I could, yeah, that would work. I could do that too.
Can I ask though about keeping kindergarten separate? Because in some respects, if we're looking longitudinally, well, you know, yes, I understand the cohort changes, but if we're looking, I don't know, 7th graders in the future, you know, down the line, when we have 7 years of data that we can look at, and we're seeing, oh, those 7th graders are doing really bad at math. Is it advantageous to have that kindergarten data to track, you know, that cohort? We would, in theory, know that cohort all along. Is it better to have it pulled out? Am I being clear? I don't know. It's just for, as we look at cohorts through their years, isn't it better to have kindergarten segregated?
We're doing that internally already, is following cohorts of students and sharing that with teachers.
So just advocating taking it out of what we see, even though you guys are monitoring that.
Yeah, so we monitor on an individual grade level basis, and then share that with teachers so that they can create their SLOs. So we would be able to recognize those points, but I don't think it hurts either way. I could go either way on it, but we do already monitor individual cohorts. I just always get a little nervous doing individual grade levels because it's really hard to set targets, and you really get down to very close to individual level of students, and that's where you get a lot of NAs because we just don't have enough students in our subgroups to.
Yeah.
And what then makes that difficult is everywhere there's an NA, now I need another year just to get a line, and now I can't do the trend line because I've got an NA somewhere in there. So that's the only reason I looked at it and said I just don't particularly like the singular grade level.
And would you want to see, I guess, maybe not the data broken down like this, but trend lines for cohorts?
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, we've had conversations about, you know, let's say our 11th grade African American students, they're killing it. They're doing really good. It would be interesting as we look at closing those gaps to look across all their years of schooling. You know, frequently we talk about education debt. Where does it start, right? I mean, are we already starting kindergarten kids in Shorewood with that gap? I kind of want to see that to say, yeah, we are. Already at kindergarten, those kids are starting much differently than some of these other cohorts. So I get your point, but I'm also...
But I guess I'm thinking that
but we're not going
like
to see it with that data.
Those are different data points.
Right.
They are different data points.
You know? But then we would want the data in cohort form of
right.
some sort. Or maybe we want some analysis at some point of the cohort.
But if we pull kindergarten out of here,
you're putting it in with the bigger pool, actually, is what you're
doing.
doing. You're going to put it in with the larger data.
Right. Do we lose something by putting it in with larger data?
I think we gain some.
I think we gain something.
I think as long as we can have it both ways, then it's more about like what
right.
is
If you have the
reported
cohort question and you can get that answered,
versus
Hillary, I think that's important, and Tim's saying that you can get that.
Continually putting
right.
It okay, I'm okay with that.
All right, any other changes that we want Tim to make for 2019?
Same thing with the sample sizes.
No, yeah.
On numbers.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, next up is approval of monitoring for OE5 financial planning.
I move that we approve the OE5 for financial planning.
I second. Hello, Pat.
See how the hi, Pat.
So you have before you operational expectation 5, financial planning. You have the entire report in front of you. I'm just going to go through the highlights and analysis. Biggest highlight that we had this year is the implementation of impact statements during the preliminary budget planning process. The impact statement allowed for the budget recommendations to be discussed based on the alignment with operational expectations, what are the programmatic impacts, the implementation plans, fiscal impacts, what the impact statements are doing are allowing the administrators to dive much deeper into any budgetary changes that are going to be recommended for the upcoming year. People are, when different administrators are recommending items for budget consideration, they're essentially required to think through their recommendation much more deeply, which allows for us to have deeper conversation and really get down to the nitty-gritty, I guess, with those budget recommendations. So a very positive change or impact that we had this year, and we've actually, you'll see in my reflection some improvements that we're making in the impact statement. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, OE or attachment OE5C shows budget projections that include this year and the next 4 years, and they look really bleak. And there is a reason for that, because we are in the last year of the biennial state budget. We really don't know exactly what the state is going to contribute or invest in K-12 public education. And so, for our purposes, the only thing that I can really do is estimate very conservatively. We really won't have much of an idea of what the budget is going to look like until mid to late January, although depending upon what happens in the November election, obviously could have us leaning one direction or another, but still we typically get a glimpse into what the budget is going to look like at the annual state education convention, and then those budgets typically aren't hammered out and approved until May, sometimes even June. So this is something we have to pay very close attention to. I work with business managers in the North Shore. I work with business managers in the greater Milwaukee area. We talk about how we're, what we're hearing, how we're estimating, all of that kind of stuff. So as you look at that particular attachment, it looks kind of shocking, but I want you to understand it looks shocking because we just don't have all the answers.
Well, and it's predicated on cautious numbers. I appreciate you doing this, Pat, and again, I would like to ask that we provide some of that context so that that's visible to people, because absent, right, we're here, we're hearing it, the people that are in the audience are hearing it, but somebody who goes and looks at this sees that and their hair is on fire.
Sure.
And so I think we need to give some context that says these are projections based on these things. It's an election year. We have a lot of information we don't know because it's an election year, and therefore I use the most cautious numbers, and it may all be fine.
And that's a really great suggestion, and one of the things that I can do is I can reprint this particular exhibit for board books and include essentially what I said in this analysis on that page.
That would be helpful.
And then just have Theta repost
Yeah.
it. Essentially, it's not changing anything. What I'm going to put on there is already in this report.
Right, right here.
It's just that I'm going to put it in two different locations.
Right, just repeat it where if somebody just pulls that up, that information is still there. Thank you.
So with that being said, if anyone has any other questions on OE5, I'd be happy to answer those.
So can you, I just had a question, just remind me, like, so the impact statements, you start collecting those, I guess, starting in spring?
We already have 6 impact statements for the 1920 school year in the file right now.
Okay. And so, and these are coming from?
They're mainly coming from the administrators, although I will say at least one of my impact statements is something that I'm pulling from an area under my supervision. So it's not, these aren't just ideas that are coming from my head. They're not just ideas that are coming from Tim Joint's head. they're concepts that we're pulling together as we administrate in our particular areas of focus. And so that's like I said, we have one operational expectation, here we go. We have one impact statement that's already been pulled forward from last year that was not approved. And then we have 5 other impact statements that are new for this year. So that's another one of the benefits of that impact statement is it's allowing for us to develop conversation around the development of the budget much earlier than what a school district would normally have those conversations starting in January, February. Now we're already starting to develop those impact statements in
October.
I think we already had a couple of
September.
impact statements at the end of September. So we're starting the conversation much earlier.
Any further discussion or questions for Pat on week 5? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Patrick.
And then reflections
The
for.
reflection, and again, I'm very pleased to go through this particular reflection because there are not a lot of changes that I would recommend. I think that this OE was, the indicators that we're looking at were well developed by other districts that have gone through this process long before us. And so as we developed this, the tweaks that we made, I think, just really fit quite well. The one thing that I mentioned is we added to the impact statement ongoing fiscal impact of the recommendations and the annual process for evaluations. So again, what we're doing is we're not making adjustments to the actual policy, but what we are doing are taking the tools that we have within the policy and continually improving those tools so that we're doing a better job in meeting the policy.
So I guess, and this is maybe just for you, Brian, the one thing I would ask is that I guess once we have a better sense of the budget after November from our governor and where this is going, that we have another conversation about what the impact actually will be.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we won't have the numbers probably until
But you probably have a better sense of where things might be headed.
Yeah, again, as Pat said, usually by the state school board convention, we would have,
right?
yeah, we would know who the governor is, and then they would have just an initial idea of the direction. I think this year, more than many other years, there could be dramatic differences in depending on who wins. So either way, we'll be prepared, but we can come back probably second meeting in January, first meeting in February with our just initial projection of where we'd be at. Put that up against our estimates from here.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Tiff.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, and monitoring of OE9, communication with the public. I'll take a motion.
Move that we approve monitoring for OE9, communication with the public.
Second?
Hi, Ted.
Hello, Ted.
So I'm happy to have this opportunity to present a monitoring report on operational expectation 9, OE9, which focuses on communicating with the public. So basically this report primarily highlights results from our parent and community survey, which was administered for the second consecutive year. It was conducted in May 2018. And in terms of the highlights, the results were largely positive. Results indicated that a majority of respondents are satisfied with Shorewood School District communications and with individual school communications. The responses reflected general satisfaction about the timeliness of our communications, the channels for input and feedback, which we were pleased to see, as well as communications that build support for the district. Also, overall, the district communication was the top satisfaction in the how are we doing section of the survey. So those were very positive highlights. In terms of the analysis portion, overall the survey certainly reflected general satisfaction. We did note that responses from parents and families who have children in the district continue to be higher marks than those responding who do not currently have children in the district. So we realize that, of course, parents and families are bound to get more communications from us just by virtue of being on Infinite Campus, and our listservs and so on, not to mention our mailing list, but we do feel like this still presents an opportunity to continue to improve in this area. One positive sign is that based on the difference of the results from this survey in 2018 over the previous year, 2017, we did see some improvement with respect to non-parent responses. So in other words, responses from community members who don't have children in the district. In 2017, responses from those community members without children in the district indicated that 58% of community members agreed or strongly agreed with the statement, I am satisfied with the communication that comes from the district, and 22% disagreed or strongly disagreed. In 2018, responding to the same question, 60% of community members without children in the district said they agreed or strongly agreed. So that's 2% higher difference, not much, but only 13% disagreed or strongly disagreed. So that's a drop of almost 10%. So that shows that we are making some small gains. We still feel like we can continue to improve in that area, but it's a hopeful sign. So just walking through briefly the report, we measure how we're doing specifically with regard to, again, assuring the timely flow of information, strategic two-way communication and opportunities for input, and then also communications that help build understanding and support for the district. In the responses on the survey questions, which include I am satisfied with the communication that comes from the district is effective in providing timely communications via multiple channels. The results were consistently positive, and they actually were trending upward over last year's results, which again is a positive sign. So responding to that first question I mentioned, I am satisfied with the communication that comes from the district. We had 85% agree or strongly agree with that statement, over 80% from last year. So again, general results indicated that we were trending upward with these questions. We also had questions related to communications that positively impact my overall support of the school district. So answers to that question were again 5% higher, agreeing or strongly agreeing with that statement over last year's results, and the results were similarly high for individual school communications. So we feel very positively about what the survey results are telling us in terms of how our communications are trending.
Ted, can I ask just to back up just to the one about the website?
Yes.
Just for timing wise, was this survey done before the new website was sort of up and running and all the bugs worked out, or is that, I'm just wondering about the timing.
Around the same time, I thought, right?
That's a good question. Yeah, the survey basically dropped soon after the launch of our website. So I don't know if you guys remember, but it launched just before our Authentic Learning Showcase, which I believe was May 2nd. And so I think the website launched on April 30th or May 1.
So we can hope that next year that number would be
Even
higher,
better.
given the work on the new website.
Yes. Yeah, great question. And we're hoping that too. Our anecdotal feedback on the website has been very positive, and we continue to add content to that every week. So we feel much better about the tools we have to communicate digitally and online with the new website in place. One other thing I wanted to mention is that with respect to the communications questions on the survey that were apples to apples comparative data with other peer school districts, we were between 10% and 38% higher than peer districts on those communications related questions. So we're not only trending upward with regard to how we're doing over last year, but we're also comparing favorably to peer districts, which is positive. And I also just want to, my colleague is not here with me today, but I just want to commend Caitlin Watson for her work with the district, and much of this is thanks to her efforts. I just want to mention that. The second part of this OE9 report is 9.2, which is basically all about preparing and publishing information for our annual meeting. So you guys receive that as an appendix. So that is it in a nutshell.
So this might be a question for you, Brian. One of the indicators, number 3, was about the district provides opportunities for input and feedback, and there was, I think, some interesting differences for the elementary and the SIS and the high school. And so I guess one of the questions I would have is, how is this data shared with the leadership at those buildings about, like, as an indicator? And it's not really clear by the way the question is asked, because it says the district. So I don't know if they're thinking about
what does that conjure in someone's head?
Yeah, I don't know if they're thinking about school communication versus district communication. But it was something that I noticed.
Sure. So we'll have to. I haven't done anything with that yet, so that'd be something that we can certainly look into. Part of what we're in the process of doing, we have established, building leadership teams to be able to have some of these conversations, and then have the leadership team be able to engage the rest of the staff. So that might be a good opportunity to be able to work those channels to be able to ensure that feedback.
So Ted, awesome, really great, and so congratulations to Caitlin and to you. Don't sell yourself short. You have a lot to do with this. As you look at this, the survey results, do you see any areas where you would like to get other information? Are there, I know every time if we add stuff to our surveys with Shorewood specific, we lose that comparative piece, but is there other information that you'd like to know about that we're not currently asking that you think would be valuable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think even what Haru just mentioned to me is sort of an intriguing area in terms of, okay, when we do look at school responses, of course we're measuring the overall district response, and then we have responses for the schools, and we do see some variability. It would be great to add sort of like a why comments, field perhaps right underneath that question.
Right.
Where especially the ones where we see variability. There is, of course, a general comments area later in the survey, but
that gets lost if you don't tie it to a particular piece.
Right. So I think that's a really great question, and I think we could probably talk to Bill and Sue at School Perceptions about the possibility of maybe having a more targeted answer, especially around the individual school responses in that area.
And then my only other question was, I'm the person that always says we can never over-communicate. They get sick of me saying that. So I think this is awesome that we have, on a peer basis, that we're doing so well, because that says we're doing a great job, which means there's still room for improvement. But on a outreach basis to the non-parent piece, what are your ideas for how we better serve that group? Because, they support us, whether we reach them or not, right? They are certainly financially our supporters, and so we have to make sure that we are keeping them well informed, and I think that's important.
Yes, and in terms of thoughts and reflections, like that is my area to grow, where I think we can still keep trying to improve and bumping our numbers up among those community members who don't have children in the district. So really, in terms of our primary communications vehicles to those individuals, we have Shorewood Today magazine, which is the biggest.
Yeah.
We have the Village Managers Memo, which a lot of community members who are not district parents subscribe to. We do have our social media channels. We would love to get more sign-ups and more followers for non-families and non-parents. And then we also have our new digital signage system here at the high school, which
I think is great.
Notice,
yeah.
Which is a good thing. And so we're trying to use all of those to the best of our ability, but this is something we're going to continue to work on. And then, another thought is just the way that we connect with other groups in the community. So we have
our outreach
group.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So making sure that we're sharing information with, for instance, the Shorewood Historical Society and other community pretty much our strategy for the upcoming year. Hopefully we can do that more effectively.
I'm
Does-
wondering too,
go
if
ahead.
we can't add the rec department
I was just
into
gonna
that
say the
mix,
same thing.
because, you know, not only are you getting people that are older in the community that utilize, you know, our resources through the rec department, but also those younger families at Great
Mhm.
Beginnings and swimming lessons and all the other programming that the rec department offers that kind of catches people outside of the school.
Yeah,
And
even
I know they've
our rec
done-
department flyer, could we do a little blurb in there that talks about what's happening in the schools?
Right, well, I know their newsletter, they're trying to get readership in that. I know, I'm just thinking when I go to the fitness center, looking at the billboard and,
Right.
showing what's happening. So I'm wondering if that can be part of what we increase efforts through, because I do think they reach, thinking just for facilities to target our Bright Beginnings families, yes, perhaps they don't have children yet, older children yet in the district, but they will be.
They're starting in.
And, how do we engage more of those families? So hopefully we can do that through our rec department.
That's a great idea. And I'll definitely add that to our plan for this year.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Mm-mm.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
All right,
Thanks,
all in
Ted.
favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries 5-0.
Aye with an exclamation.
Okay, there's nothing on the superintendent's consent agenda. Public comments number 2. Okay. So, board governance, some liaison and organization reports. So, seed update.
Seed did not meet last week, so it meets next week,
Oh.
Monday. So no report.
So that's short.
No report.
Right.
Okay. They do have, I guess I'll say one thing, they have, Tony Evers is going to be at a meeting on October 25th, right, Pablo?
That's SWASA, yeah.
That's
SWSA.
SWASA.
Oh, that's SWASA, sorry,
Yep.
forget
Yeah,
it.
'cause I was
Yep.
bummed 'cause I'm
Okay,
gone.
SWASA update.
Me too.
Tony Evers is gonna be at the meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
What
Thursday.
she said. Yes.
I had a previous meeting that I emailed you all about, I couldn't go, but Brian, could you?
Yeah, so, so I had an opportunity to go today. I'll send around the minutes and kind of the notes from it, but just some highlights. So the legislative update is something that we do on a regular basis with that group, probably one of its strongest functions. And so that was essentially around the governor's race and really that essentially being a toss-up. The Marquette poll, probably the last Marquette poll before the election is coming out tomorrow morning. And so that data will be available for whatever it's worth. And then but essentially the word is the governor's race is probably a toss-up. And depending on how that goes, the direction for our budgets could be substantially different. So, so it wasn't anything maybe that was new information,
Surprising,
maybe
yeah.
just confirmation about where we're at, and that November 6th is going to matter quite a bit. So we'll keep our eye on that. Again, we'll be prepared either way, but we'll see how that goes. So we also just had some conversations about what boards are doing as far as advocacy pieces. I think the special ed vouchers is an area that that we were leaders on in the resolution. So I talked to Chris Thiel, who's at MPS. So I believe they're up to about 20 districts now that have passed resolutions. I think Superior was the last district that did that. So just wanted to, again, thank you for doing that and passing that on. That's continued its momentum and seems to be hopefully an area that we can make some progress on, even if it's not the 90%. If it's a 60% or whatever it is, it would be something valuable. So, so we anticipate getting some action off of that.
If I could jump in there,
Yeah.
just from talking to Chris, I think I talked a week ago or so, it's going to be really important that we reach out to our friends that are on other boards or communities to urge them to pass the similar type resolution as we passed. There is a lot of momentum. They updated the map so you can start seeing
Who's
which
doing it?
districts, who's doing it. So I think the more pressure we can apply on some of our neighboring districts or maybe districts we grew up in,
Why do you always look at me?
I didn't always look at you. I
What's
looked
our,
around.
we have some
Conservative.
relatives of neighbors in other districts.
Yeah, this
Depending
is
on where
key.
they are.
I mean, and my mic's not on to turn off, but initially, I mean, it was at 26.5. I think this pressure pushed Tony Evers to ask for 60% in his, which was a huge step. We got the this gubernatorial race going on. So the more we shouldn't just relax and say we passed the resolution, our work is done. It's not. You know, there's a lot we can do. So keep talking to your friends that are
And
elsewhere.
I'll talk about this in a minute, but it came up at the WASB resolutions as well, so.
Oh, that's good.
And then finally, at the end of the meeting, we had talked about some opportunities for research. So we are partners in the Hanover group, which is a research resource for us essentially. That as districts would have any research questions that they would like posed, then Hanover has the ability to be able to do some research at a national level. We can get it at a discounted price, being part of SWSA. And so one of the proposals that came up would be to gather some information nationally around districts that have looked at alumni networks, the development of alumni networks, and how those would be used to contribute to student success. And so that's something that I'll touch base with Ted on, that Ted's already talked about. Again, how do we make sure that we're tapping our alumni, not only recognizing their great accomplishments, and not only just asking them for money to help support our programs, but also to be able to build a network. So, you know, similar to what many universities do, that, you know, being a Shorewood graduate means something, that you're able to give back, and so that we would have not only locally here with some mentorships of students maybe that are interested in particular careers, but I know we had one of our distinguished alumni last year, came back for the Tradition of Excellence Awards, who's down in Louisiana at LSU, who's doing incredible, you know, cancer research. So he actually, you know, had brought it up to Ted and I, you know, about, listen, if you have any students that are interested in science or anything like this, then, you know, send them my way. So that's one of the really, I think, next steps for us from an advancement office, is to be able to really connect how our kids are directly connecting with that alumni network, and have that be a very structured, deliberate process. So I was encouraged to hear that there's other districts looking at that, and that we will likely be able to use some national research to see what other districts have done. And then along with developing our own also. So
yeah, and even to tap into that for our high school counselors, right? To know that here, if students are curious, here are people you can reach out to talk about. I mean, that would be just a great tool.
Yeah, really important. So, yeah, so those were 3 highlights from today. Again, I'll make sure we forward out the minutes that come from that meeting, because, you know, there was quite a bit, but those are 3 things that I think are directly applicable to our work here.
Thank you. Rec board update.
Yes, so I was glad to go to the rec board because having missed the meeting where the rec department presented to all of us, they did a mini presentation for the advisory board, which was nice to see. They're gearing up for winter, which never stops
Winter,
for them.
spring,
As soon as they
They're on to the next. They're like a retail department, you know, they're like a store.
I was interested to hear that the rec department is taking over planning of the Ghost Train Halloween event from the village. So they were doing a little bit more research into what that all entailed, but of course, it'll be a good event. I'm not sure why, I believe that the people that were organizing it just no longer had the time to do it. So in lieu of the other Halloween event that the
So they're gonna just do this.
it will be this, and there will be fun things in the Corner Bakery parking lot.
That's awesome.
So keep that in mind on Halloween, if you're not doing the Renegade trick-or-treating in your neighborhoods.
Or seeing scary movies at the Milwaukee Film Festival.
Or
like me.
seeing scary movies, yes.
Or watching the Brewers and World Series.
Or that.
Right. Whatever you're doing on Halloween. It was good to update them again on just the facilities work, and it was good to hear Jennifer Anderson's sort of viewpoint on it, having attended the FACT meetings. I'm just trying to keep them in the loop as to what's happening with facilities. And I also talked to them just a little bit about the security grants and explaining what we had applied for, what we were able to achieve, and what we weren't able to achieve, just given some of our I don't want to say limitations with the rec department, because they're not limitations, but I guess the view of the state that they are that prevented us from getting all of the funds. So it was a good meeting, and they're doing great work. I wish I would have seen, or the timing of it, I thought it was nice to see the rec department ratings in the community and parent survey, because they were fantastic.
Great.
So, they do great work.
Great, thank you. So I think I mentioned to you guys last time that I sit up now on the WASB's resolution committee. We met for 9 hours.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's like, oh, right. And that was just the first meeting.
That should be the only
But,
meeting.
so this is what I'll say. 37 resolutions were put forth, like at least 10 from Eau Claire. I know, I had that moment like, there's a part of me that's like, wait a minute, we could do that many at least. But
They have a couple board members that pass a lot.
they put out a lot. But what I will say is that, this meeting was to get us to the stage where we picked the ones that we wanted to talk about more, and
At
the
the
ones that
meeting,
were gonna
yeah.
definitely not be on there. That, and they were, the reasons why they wouldn't pass is because, or they wouldn't move to the next level is because they're not timely. They don't actually need like a resolution, it's much more of a local control issue, or something like that. There were 9 districts that put in the special ed voucher one, so all 9 are gonna kind of be combined
Work
into
together.
one resolution. That one moved forward. And so our next meeting is in a couple weeks in Wisconsin Rapids.
So is it safe to say if it's happening at this WASB, that's happening at other, the idea of the?
This is the only one.
Oh, this is statewide.
This is statewide.
So typically, resolutions that are put forward through these committees that advance out of the committee, do they generally pass?
No.
No.
That's not a definite. I mean, it could.
It could,
Right.
but it's
So
not.
this is a group of, I would say there was 30 of us here, and there's gonna be 421 at that meeting.
Right.
So we had a long conversation about gun control. There was a resolution about gun control, and, people felt strongly like,
It
this
won't
isn't gonna
go
go
anywhere.
anywhere. Every time it's come up, it hasn't passed. And so, can we change the wording? Can we talk about mental health? Like, it's a little bit about trying to figure that out. And it made me realize that there might have been support for what we put forward before, but they were trying to think about it in terms of what would get passed as well. So it's an interesting, group and dynamic around that. But, and then some of the resolutions are about things that are like really about changing wording or like updating language. It's not that controversial. But yeah, so we'll see what happens. The special ed one, I think there's a lot of support for, but the 90% was what people had a little bit of a hard time with. And so I thought that was interesting. Like, maybe we should ask for less money. And so then there was a group who felt like, well, if you're going to give it to one, to somebody, you should give it to all of us. And, so anyway, it was a good conversation.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Well, I hope,
mean,
I hope they provided coffee.
Yeah, lots of
9
lots of
hours.
coffee. Okay, and then Brian and I met with the village president and manager yesterday to talk a little bit about, and really we spent a lot of the time, I think, talking about our facilities plan, because they wanted to know a little bit more about what the process was like, and then what the estimated borrowing was going to be, and then the proposed impact of that. So Brian brought a hard copy of the survey that everybody will be getting shortly, and we talked a little bit about that. They're in a different place in terms of like what they can do to raise taxes, and they're also in a budget shortfall. And so, talking through about like what that means for the average resident of Shorewood, understanding like how the budget works in terms of the village and school district, I think is something that both parties felt like we need to do a better job of, and maybe having some sort of joint meeting about that, or something that like provides people some more information about, this is what the school district is, where your taxes are going here, and this is where your taxes are going here. So I thought that was a fruitful conversation, because they hadn't been involved in really any of the conversations prior to this around facilities or the upcoming referendum. So I thought, a good start for that. They also wanted to start to schedule like a full village board, school board meeting, or at least try to. And we've tried to do this in the past, with some limited
Oh,
success.
boy. Yeah.
But we are, thinking about December 3rd. So I told her I would put that out there. It's a Monday.
Would that be an official formal meeting, or is that more of a linkage like we had talked about? Because the
So
Hanukkah.
it would be like a,
That's Hanukkah.
It's Hanukkah.
oh, thank you. So then we won't be having that meeting on December 3rd. I think it was gonna be like we both bring, I mean, we would call it a linkage. They wouldn't use that terminology.
Right.
But we would both bring agenda items.
Okay.
And one of the things that we talked about, because me and you both were on the buy board
Right.
previously, was that one of the reasons I think the buy board didn't work very well was because we felt like we had to have had to have a project or do something. Like,
Right.
And one of the things that we suggested was that we have so
Talking
much
is doing
information to
something.
share with each other
Right.
that we can really just have it be like, I want you to know that, we could come and decide as a board, these are the 3 things we want the village trustees to know about our
Yeah.
work. And they could do something similar.
Yeah.
There already are 2 things that they'd like us to talk about. One is that they would like us to pay, they currently pay for our waste management at our buildings. They would like to have us pay those bills, which we can decide. And then the crossing guard. There's some concern about the cost around that. And so I don't know, we could talk about it with them. Those decisions, we are in different budget cycles. We'd have to talk to Pat about that.
Is that waste management conversation part of the entire, like, the village giving that to people to contract? Because wasn't there something about charging fees for refuse?
Yeah, this would be more
That's
about,
separate.
this would be
It's
more
separate.
about us just kind of, probably likely, the proposal I think was not to necessarily use a different vendor, but just to cover more of the cost that
That
we
they
would have.
incur on
That they
our
incur,
property.
yeah. So it'd be like $8,500, I think is what the estimate was. So I can get more details. I can follow up with Rebecca and get more details on both of those, because I want to be able to see the numbers and bills and that type of thing off of both recycle and then the crossing guards too. So the crossing guards are they use a vendor, as they contract that work out through I think facilitated through the police department. But those are all things that I need to be able to follow up on, is just from an operational standpoint, just to see where it'd be at.
They were advocating for us to completely take over the contract, or to do something,
Or just to pay for it.
take the whole program
No,
into
they suggested
our-
a 50-50 split. But I mean, this was just kind of at the end of the conversation, and we should have a longer conversation about this,
So
obviously.
bottom line for a
Yeah.
taxpayer, we're just.
We're just shifting
We're
dollars.
just shifting.
We're not.
Yes.
We're
yeah.
not,
Right.
gotcha.
Yeah. And again, this was like just something that they
Initial
wanted to discuss
conversation,
with us,
yeah.
yeah. And then the last was that, the village, Allison had gone to a event from the League of Municipalities where, she heard about something called the State of the Community. So, like they do the State of a Village address type thing, we do the State of the District address during our annual meeting, and then there's the bid that also does some events. And so what this community did, I think it was Appleton, they did something called the State of the Community, where everybody, the 3 big kind of entities came together and did something. And so she wanted to talk about potentially doing something like that here, which I thought could be, again, part of this kind of like us, sharing with each other and supporting each other as governing bodies around our different work. So.
How does the timing of that work with, given the different budgeting
Budget cycles and-
Yeah.
and that are
Yeah.
are
We haven't figured that part out yet.
statutory limitations,
Right.
Yeah, that's what we'd have to work out. It's
Yeah.
likely, I guess at least my interpretation of it was, it'd be more of kind of a highlight of here's what we're working on, strategic plan types of things, and not necessarily like an
Move our
annual meeting.
to-
Yeah.
Right, no.
Yeah, nothing
right,
like
yeah.
that, yeah.
We would still do our annual meeting in our Sabre district, yeah.
Yeah, I would think of it as a little bit more like we do in
Informational
February,
updates,
kind of
yeah.
that mid-year update type of thing,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the roundtables, but
Yeah.
just a,
A one-stop shop.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if
Exactly.
I'm a resident, I can
Yeah.
come and hear
Everybody's
presentations
activities.
from
Yeah.
3 different
Yeah.
entities, and
Conceptually,
yeah,
that's a
it's
good idea.
yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like something that would be efficient.
Okay, so
Any
thank you for the
Any
December
updates on any
3rd.
big plans in terms of the village? From like, if you think facilities wise, what they're,
I think that they are in the process right now of reviewing their budget. They have a $850 million that they're gonna need to close.
850 million?
Mm-hmm. No.
Thousand.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was like,
I was
what?
like, I
On
put
an
that
$8
down
million
because they're
budget?
gonna-
That's bad.
Okay, sorry.
I'm
That's
selling my
that's
house
own
today.
notes. K instead of M.
Like she said, just add another zero.
Just add another zero.
Anyway,
3 zeros.
so they're working on that.
Okay.
Can you just say that again?
850,000.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So we talked a little bit about kind of just, I mean, what's interesting is, right, they've also deferred maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, it's very similar things happening, you know, in terms of the village and district. But they also, and then they've kind of done some similar things to us in terms of, like, doing smaller projects that don't necessarily fix the problem, and then they're kind of still in this boat, like, 5 years later of needing to go back and do it. So I think, you know, they understand, like, the facilities needs on our end. And so they're, I think, looking at kind of some of those issues right now and prioritizing their budget and looking for ways to reduce costs, so.
A little late ad, but related to what you said, we did get an update from Terry Phillips, who's the head of SWASA, about just the incredible amount of districts across the state that are
The referenda update? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The
Well, I
Bible
sent
400
you
and some,
that, like,
right.
list,
in
yeah.
November, because we've all been in this boat the last many years,
Right.
deferring maintenance to maintain our programming. So I think that wanted to mention that.
Right.
This meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so for the board retreat, thank you guys for a fantastic retreat. I just wanted to put two things up. So we spent the majority of our time on results policies 2, 3, and 4, which we're gonna look at in a minute. Two other pieces of documentation. One was the linkage schedule that we agreed to, so everybody can have that. And I'll make sure, I'll write up something to send out on Infinite Campus to just invite people to any or all of them, and to meet with their board members. And then the second piece was that we decided to have a school candidate information session on Tuesday, October 23rd, so at our next school board meeting, prior to the meeting. I used the agenda that we had, from last time, I added a couple things, but I just wanted to kind of confirm that seems like a good plan or agenda, if anybody has other pieces. So, welcome and introductions, what the school board does, so talking about policy governance, this boardroom to classroom piece that Brian has talked about, and then student achievement results, and then talking about some of the nuts and bolts in terms of, that date needs to be, all the dates need to be fixed, the 2019 election deadlines and paperwork, and then time commitment and benefits and questions. So, so I'll fix that and then have that, make sure that we start sending out information about that and inviting people. So I would ask all of you to invite people who you think might be interested to hear more about it. We're doing it a little bit earlier than last time, I think like a month earlier, but I think that's fine. So.
Might be appreciated.
Yeah, longer time to think about it. Okay, and then the last piece of kind of report is the work group discussion, which we had last time. So one of the things, one of the questions that's come up is about whether or not we need to be posting these and how people get involved. And I was looking again at the work groups, and so I guess I'm going to make a suggestion here for Brian about this. These are his work groups, is that the ones that are essentially staff meetings become appendices, their reports become appendices to the OEs that they're attached to, because each of these are have been created to achieve a particular operational goal, and so to move those off of this page essentially and have those be tied directly to board policy through our operational expectations, and then to, you know, I think about how, who is it going to be involved in these other groups, and to be, I think, pretty transparent about how people get, if people are gonna be invited to participate, how they do that, and then posting those meetings as open meetings.
Sure, would that involve community, that would currently involve community members? Okay, so as far as
That's 3.
Yeah,
Well,
so.
and then there's the 2 interest groups on here as well, so.
Right. So as far as the staff groups, so as far as the staff groups for the posting to the website, is that, so that, am I hearing that right, that information then wouldn't be posted on the website, it'd be
Right.
part of the policy? Is
Right.
that correct? So that'd be taken off the website, and then but we would continue to post information for the community groups that are publicly posted, that would continue to be on the website?
Yeah, I
Or
mean, I
is
guess how I think about it is that work groups are groups that you've created to achieve like a specific goal.
Right.
Whereas my sense is like RTI, that's like a staff meeting that
Ongoing,
has
yeah.
to happen like as part of like ongoing
Right.
work. They're like, I feel like the purposes are different.
Sure.
And so that's what I mean, I think from a board perspective, like to have it linked to the operational expectation makes more sense.
Yeah.
Than to have it freestanding out there, like
Yeah.
not tied to it.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on what would go up to the website as far as information and communication with the board. And then what would just go with, what communications would just be through the reports. So what I'm hearing is that from the community, oh, go ahead.
I mean, that's my suggestion. I don't
Yeah.
know, you know, what other people
I
think.
think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's,
That makes sense.
okay.
And when you talk about, so you're really not talking, it's not so much the driver isn't being community as much as kind of purpose and charge.
Goal, yeah.
Right.
Right.
Because I think that, like, when I look at, like I said, RTI, like, that's about achieving
Right. That's
these things,
right.
you know, or, you know, part of the results, or
Operational
instructional
expectations,
programming,
right,
whereas I feel
programming.
like the diversity group, the student nutrition group, the wellness group, I mean, they have like something they're trying to achieve.
Sure.
For the district, and I think they seek community input in different ways. The interest groups are the advanced learning and
Special.
well, actually had Shorewood partners here. We used to also have students with special needs. So those are, I think, already kind of like groups that are formed where people are sharing information about the programming we have in the district. So those, I think, you know, those are already happening too, but those are really parent specific, like to give information.
Yeah, those almost end up being like somewhat school based, right? So if you're.
Yeah, I don't know how, I haven't been to any of the advanced learning
Yeah, they've usually cut
meetings.
across.
Or
kind of
or
multiple.
district where you have information about if you have you have a
Yeah.
child that's an advanced learner or a special,
Right.
here's information about
Correct.
this program, all right?
That's
That's
correct.
again, very operational to me.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I just think that would be, get at them, like what needs to be posted, what doesn't need to be posted, and where community
Participation might be invited.
is invited.
Sure, okay.
'Cause, like I said, I think that would be a better, more like clear way to do this.
Okay.
So.
All right, will do.
Okay.
Okay. So speaking results, so board action agenda. So I typed up the results that we discussed, and the edits for 2, 3, and 4. So I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the edits to board results policies 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. So what I did for 2.
I second that.
Okay. What I did for 2 is I don't know why, but mine's not coming up colored.
Mine isn't
Colored?
either.
Right.
Okay,
It
sorry.
struck beyond the school.
Yeah, well, that was actually the only thing that happened
Right.
in R2. So we ended with creating work that is meaningful to the community, period. So that's what we wanted for that one.
Yeah, that whole formatting is weird on that one.
Yeah, it's probably because,
No, I know.
I don't know. Anyway, oh no, R3 has red in it. Okay.
Yeah, so does
I think it
R4.
was just because it wasn't added.
Okay. So here, we
Just
changed,
removal is just.
and I'll invite Tim to come up if you see something that I like horribly botched from that conversation. Students will be ethical people treating themselves and others with respect. contribute to a better world through citizenship and service, and have a growth, so this is the one that we didn't actually write out together, but I tried to wordsmith.
This was the last, yeah.
Have a growth mindset, be adaptable to change, and internally motivated. We had all three of those words up there. I didn't know if we wanted.
I think the collective pieces captures what we tried to talk about.
Is that, Tim, what you had on your next?
R4?
No,
R3.
R3.
Character.
Because we talked about, yeah. I mean, growth mindset, adaptable to change, and internally motivated are the three things that you would have to
Right.
Define. Okay. So that's what we did for that one, and then for results, or sorry, wellness. I'm really excited that we did make the changes here. So we went down from 5 to 3, and it's feel a sense of belonging and connection to their school community, maintain a healthy body, and understand their emotions and cope effectively with stress.
So you read it as to their school community, should we change it?
Yeah, but it says in their school community.
Oh,
You
should I say it too?
Yeah,
Oh, I don't know.
It's usually
I'm
connection
tired,
to as
so-
opposed to connection in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that
Ada?
needs to be updated.
Can you just mark that edit and then we can still approve it with that one change? Sure, it's 4.1. Students will feel a sense of belonging and connection to their school community.
Instead of in.
Okay. So yeah, we captured those. Okay. Are you guys?
Yeah.
All right. So we get to have new boards made and new books
Yeah.
made, I guess.
Yep.
So that's exciting. Okay.
New boards and new books, yeah. Wow.
I have a first and a second. Any further comment? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks for the thumbs up. This is always a good thing to do. Wait, is Ted not here? Okay.
Ted's
Who's
not.
presenting the check?
So, yes, I thought
It's just
Ted and,
recommending approval.
so
Ted was
Ted
here.
may have
He might
had,
have had
His
to-
computer's still here, so.
Oh, he might have just,
Oh.
so let's
yeah.
go out of order.
All right, we're gonna go out of
Ted
order.
and Tim were
Patrick.
going to be here, so.
I will take a motion, and I think it needs to be read exactly. Yes.
Correct.
I
Okay.
move that we approve, I move for the approval of resolution authorizing temporary borrowing in an amount not to exceed 4.5 million pursuant to section 67.12 sub 8 sub A1 Wisconsin statutes.
Second.
So,
Yeah.
Patrick, do you want to say a
I got
couple
three
words about
things
this?
fast.
Just this is our annual short-term borrowing.
Yep.
The borrowing closed today, with a net, percentage of interest of 2.688, I believe it was. I will say that, school districts across the state that are doing this at this point in time are all while we're all happy that the economy is doing better, one of the byproducts of the economy doing better is that short-term borrowing rates go up. So our borrowing rate is a full percent higher than it was at this point in time last year. We did receive 2 bids. Winning bidder was, or the low bid was Robert W. Baird again.
I was gonna say they were last year too.
Yeah, they have been all the years that I've been here, so.
And to clarify, this is the borrowing that is short-term going to be paid off when the state.
We
aid
pay this
comes
off
in.
on the
December.
24th of January.
Yeah.
Is the term of the loan. So essentially, this is,
Our cash flow.
we get money in very sporadic amounts. For example, state aid is in 5 payments for K-12 public education. The first payment is 15% because they pay the voucher schools off first, so they get a larger payment in at the first payment of the year. Then we get 3 payments of 25%, and then a late aid payment in August. We do not get a tax payment until the 15th of January. So what we do this in order for us to be able to
Make payroll.
make our, pay our bills, make payroll on Monday, until we get that first tax bill or tax payment in January, and then we pay this off, and we're good.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Nobody gets to leave early tonight. I've got a lot of signatures that I need.
Okay.
Okay.
Everybody but me.
All right, so now, Ted,
I'm
don't
red
worry,
light.
we didn't forget you. I was hoping you were going to get the big check.
I'm so sorry, I went to go charger actually for my computer.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay, wait a second. So I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the $25,000 donation from Seed and the request to name, quote, Seed Collaboration Space, unquote.
I second that.
Okay. So,
Okay.
let's hear about it.
All right, so Tim Kenny was gonna join me, he wasn't able to, so I will do my best to, just describe this to you guys. Tonight
Yeah.
we're requesting,
The room on the other side of the wall.
yes, exactly, support for, coming from Seed to, name the space on the other side of this wall. The idea is to create a flexible space, area for our kids to learn, flexible workspace, non-traditional sort of modern classroom environment. We're really excited about it. Tim Kenny and Vicki Chavon have been brainstorming on this since last May, and Seed really stepped up by providing the funding for this. So further, I just want to reiterate that contingent upon having the space named after Seed, it is with the understanding that they have committed to supporting any room improvements, technology, furnishings, or other needs associated with the space that arise in future years by providing grants to support those costs. So that is part of the understanding of the Seed. So that's what we're requesting.
So through facilities planning and additions and things like that, you're saying that Seed is agreeing to, if the space bumps out, for example, they're agreeing to renovate that again?
I don't think it's at that extent. I think it's a little bit more of as
Ongoing support?
Yeah, as things would come up, as there's furniture that would wear out, or some things that we'd say, hey, in this,
Obsolescent
it'd be really nice in this space. If it would be an enhancement that if we did something like this,
Okay.
then as Ted described, and that could be a grant process that we could go through that they would help support. So I doubt I don't think it's at the numbers of like a bump out or anything like that, but it's really just to kind of create a model for what a
Yeah.
contemporary space would be, and for us to just do some I don't know, pilot's the right word, but just be able to use that space and have kids understand it and teachers understand
I'm
it.
assuming things like as technology ages, it would be upgrading or improving
Sure.
or changing, that sort of thing.
That's
Yeah.
precisely right, exactly.
Yeah.
Your furniture needs to be
Obsolescing,
replaced and so on,
right.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Ted, is there any interest or willingness by them to do something more creative with the name so that Seed's included, and maybe get the students involved so that it could have a more catchy kind of, I don't know, we could ask them, or do they want it to be called the Seed Collaboration Space?
In a word, yes, we're
Okay.
certainly open to that, and we'd certainly be open to getting students involved with the name.
Okay.
We're excited about the concept of the space more than the name of the space.
Okay.
We're certainly open to that, and we think it's really the right thing to do back there, and
Yeah.
it would just be really fantastic for our students.
Just in my head right away, I started thinking about collaboration. I'm thinking seedling, right? And things grow, and it just seems very fitting to do something that would use that idea or something related to growth. So,
Idea cultivation space,
Yeah.
Can I ask what percentage of their donation, does the donation cover the extent of what's being done? So
Yeah.
it's 100% Seeds covering the collaboration space?
Exactly, yeah, it's covering 100% of the needs that we identified for outfit the space,
That's awesome.
including
Great.
furniture, technology, whiteboards, things like that.
Fantastic.
Our continued gratitude to that organization for what they do to support this district.
And to you, Ted, for
Yeah, for working with them.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ted.
All right, we have a couple items on the board consent agenda. I will take the motion.
I'm on a roll. I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Public comment number 2. Okay, review of to-do items.
So I will continue to meet with Tim and the teachers just regarding the MAC and single grade conversation, specifically to make sure that we're articulating the why piece and getting that out there and planning for those kindergarten meetings that would be coming up. Make sure that teachers are there for those and messaging is consistent. I'll touch base with Feda, make sure that we get a budget update after the new year, so late January, early February, just to bring Pat back around the OE tonight, but just to give us a projection. That's
And make a note to hopefully bring that teacher that spoke to us, whose name I forget because I was trying to talk to him. Yes, that would be great to hear more about that pilot.
Yes.
Can I add one more thing on our to-do list? We forgot in awards and recognition to recognize Brian for running his 8th marathon this week. So, deserves some recognition.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just happy I can walk.
I was just going to say, I'm impressed that you're sitting.
And I would argue more impressive than that was his recent publication. He has a book that just came out. It's on Amazon along with some other people. He's got a piece in there. So, with my former dissertation chair.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
So, thanks.
Yeah.
I've got a discount code too if anybody wants to buy it. So, got that today.
Okay, so then I will
Get a
make the
copy in the
changes or
library.
fix the candidate orientation document and then send out, or ask Caitlin to send out something on that, and then linkages, upcoming linkages, which I guess aren't until next month. And then for everyone, the email went out today. Many of you probably got the email from the district about the facilities. And so if you can start reminding people and
To complete it?
you know, convincing people that we want we do, we want to know what they think. So we'll also be sending out district communications from the 5 of us as well. But just to keep that on your radar.
So I was asked this afternoon, if someone didn't receive the email, whom should they contact?
So they can contact me. So they should. We always remind people to check their junk, spam mail to make sure, because sometimes that goes right there. But if they can't see it in there, they can contact myself and Veda, and we can set them up with making sure that they can track whether they got it or not, and if not, then be able to resend that. I would say the caveat too is that in the mail, when we get the mail surveys, we want to just make sure that people can, if there's 2 people in the household and one person got the email, the other person wants to fill out the survey, we'd encourage them to fill out the survey. They could do it through the paper copy or just use the code that's on the paper copy. So just want to make sure that we promote that as much as possible.
Okay. And then future agenda items that I need to track on? Seed board next time?
Right. There's an HRC meeting this week.
Okay. Oh, and one other thing I'll do is look at other dates for the village school board meeting. So we wanted to, and one of the things that we were thinking is that we would wait till after the
Election?
no, sorry, the survey came back in.
So that's late November.
That gets us in December, so I don't know, we'll have to think about it, because we already have a bunch of meetings in December, so we'll think about how we want to do it.
And I'm going for a huge chunk of time.
So we'll figure it out. Okay, so I'll put that on my list. And okay, I think we're adjourned, or we're in recess.